Good afternoon, everyone. We are in the committee of the whole meeting for the District of Squamish for July 18th. Hawkins Hall, Peace Glasgow Homish, Williamwood, which means welcome to the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. We have two items on our agenda. The first up is our solid waste bylaw and strategies. Over to Chris or Shannon, who's going to kick it off. Shannon, thank you. What's that? I didn't adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Reese, seconded by Councillor Pryor. I've never done that before.
Oh, yeah.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. I'm back. Over to you. I've never not just adopt the agenda and leave the agenda.
All right, good afternoon, Mayor and Councillors. For those of you tuning in, my name is Shannon White. I'm the Sustainability Coordinator at the District of Squamish. And we'll be presenting today the proposed new solid waste utility and regulation bylaw. Just a little bit quick agenda is that give a very brief background on why we are here and what we're discussing. Some information on the public consultation and outreach that we did and the feedback that we heard from the community, the changes that were made between when this previously was presented in May to the council, and then kind of a few revisions and tweaks that we've made, outreach and engagement, timeline, and then really want to open up to discussion and see what feedback council has for us to then revise this current version of the bylaw and then bring it forward to council for first three readings. So just as a real brief background is that on May 23rd, we came to the Committee of Whole and presented three key elements that we would like to change, staff would like to see changed in the current version of the solid waste bylaw. And the key three themes are that all properties should provide and separate their waste into multiple streams, that staff, tenants, employees are educated about how to separate, and then garbage is placed into transparent bags with an allowance of privacy bags, darker privacy bags. And the real reason behind these is, first of all, to protect our infrastructure. As most folks are aware, our landfill is filling up very quickly, and we have spent a considerable amount on a capital project to extend the lifespan, but we just want to continue that diversion and reduction of the garbage that's ending up in the landfill. And then also, hand in hand with that, assist in the community well-being through reduced greenhouse gases that are created at the landfill, in particular when organics go to the landfill, and then better management of our resources. So instead of having recyclables end up at the landfill, where can they be? They can go into the commodity markets, be reused and recycled, things like that. So through the month of June, so May 23rd to June 27th, we took these three key themes to different stakeholder groups within the community. So there were presentations, question and answer sessions for businesses. There was property management ones, specific property management ones, and then in-person meeting with kind of, how do you say it? We're kind of calling ourselves the Food Recovery Group, so that's Helping Hands, Food Bank, and Vancouver Coastal Health. And then also there was time spent at the farmers market, and then as well as an online survey. So just really trying to touch base with kind of all the different sectors and get feedback from everybody on the different proposed changes. So just really want to give an overview on what we heard. So from multifamily residents, and there is details on this in the report to council package, with the explicit comments and things kind of broken down with some stats, but as an overview, so generally with multifamily homes and property managers, they're excited about the change. They thought it was necessary. A lot of folks are already driving their compost to Carney's to separate. So they are really excited about the option of having on-site separation. The concerns that they really highlighted was limited space, either in their home, in their apartment alone, or in their building, like in the waste room. Not knowing what goes where, if there was increased cost to their stratas, and then time needed to implement, because especially with multifamily homes, their AGM only meets once a year, or they only have an AGM once a year, and contracts can only be changed at the AGM. So for example, it might have already happened for 2017, their AGM. So if we implement this, they still need to hit that AGM again. So this is just kind of raising awareness around time for implementation. For businesses, in particular, they recognized environmental benefits, thought it would improve customer engagement and satisfaction. They were happy with the list of kind of support tools we wanted to provide them, like the different solution guides and the train the trainer workshops and stuff like that. They actually were really looking forward to that. They did express concerns about the threshold because our current mixed waste threshold is 5%. So that's if there's over 5% of recyclables organics in your garbage, then when it hits the landfill, they can get charged this mixed waste fee, which is double the amount, plus increased cost to their businesses, and then also the limited space that they have for multiple bins inside their business, so like in the back end of their kitchen, for example, or also where their waste room is. And then also just training of staff. So that's what we heard there. And then on the topic of clear bags, so clear bag, overall, a lot of the feedback for clear bags came back through the survey that was conducted online. And so overall, people recognize that yes, it supports sustainable behavior, increases the diversion, and often this message was easier to, people were easier to understand the concept of why we would move to clear bags when it was a one-on-one discussion with that person, so at the farmer's market or kind of in-person presentations we offered. Businesses didn't seem to raise many issues with the clear bags because a lot of them actually already are using them in town. But the concerns, a large amount of concerns were raised through residents. The top ones being the belief that the costs will be higher. People don't want to purchase clear bags that, as they already are reusing plastic bags. Plastic should be encouraged to be put in landfill, and they don't know where to obtain the clear bags. And then they don't want people to see what is being thrown out. And as well, that the privacy bag size that we had originally proposed to council, like a grocery store bag size, was too small. So, and additionally, some people have dark bags that they need to use up as well. So those were kind of the top challenges recognized around clear bags. We just wanted to address a few of these, and by no means is this answering all of the questions and concerns around clear bags, but just really that there has been a success rate seen in moving towards transparent or clear bags, including communities that do have tote-based systems. So that's one of the concerns was raised that this isn't successful in totes in particular. All of PEI, seems like the majority of Nova Scotia and many counties in Ontario have mandated this. The real reason behind clear bags is it allows us to assess and enforce diversion. And then we will be working with retailers to ensure that clear bags are available throughout the community in different sizes and pricing, and that it will be phased in over 1 year so that folks can have a chance to use up their current stock and kind of find a good place to buy them and kind of adapt to this change. So after all this consultation and kind of discussion with the public and hearing all the different feedback, what we've done is we have made a few changes since you last saw the kind of proposed changes in May. So the first one is the mixed waste threshold. Because of the concern raised by the business community, and they will be affected by this bylaw, is that we are proposing increasing the mixed waste threshold to 20%. However, we recognize that 5%, the lower is better and better for the environment. And so the intent is that it will be set at 20% and then reduced over time. So annually it could be by 5% until we hit the 5% again. So it's kind of raising it while people adapt and then decreasing is the intention behind that. Second thing is clear bags. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of concern around it. So we wanted to include this grace period of 1 year that allows residents to use up their bags. And I'm sure retailers have the stock. the privacy bag size concern, so the folks were concerned that one, a small garbage grocery store bag wasn't big enough. So we moved to saying it could be any dark, non-transparent bag, but no more than 10% of your garbage can be dark bags. So if we go into a waste room at a business and we see that, 50% of it is dark bags, then it's a conversation we need to have with that. So that's kind of the idea around that. And then we also included a piece around progressive enforcement. So at the May Committee of Whole meeting, there was concern that 1 year was too late to wait before enforcement started. So therefore, in the bylaw, there's fines and the ability to fine. However, we would ensure that there'd be kind of a progressive working through education, communication, warnings, like ensure that folks have had that discussion and then move towards penalties. So it's kind of this, we have the ability to fine, but first we want to move through kind of a few steps. So I'll walk through that in a couple slides, a little bit more. And then one additional change that has come up since the report to council was drafted was in speaking with our wildlife coordinator, wildlife coordinator, about, thank you, wildlife coordinator, about just when are totes set out, and currently a lot of totes are being set out the night before, and as we're aware, the bears can get in totes, whether they're locked or unlocked at this point in time. There's been a request to move the set out time to 5 a.m. the day of. So this is what this reflects, this change here. It just in red is like the only change. So it's just saying totes cannot be set out earlier than 5 a.m. on your collection day. They have to be unlocked and set out by 8 until 5 p.m. And then they can only be unlocked between 5 and 7 p.m. It's a little bit complicated, but the only piece we're proposing to change is people can't basically set them out the night before. 5 a.m. is the earliest. So this is kind of, and sorry, were there any questions on this? I don't want to make it
I think
more
there's questions
complicated.
about the whole thing, so that's.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So just real high level, and this is in the report as well, is just there is the major changes to the current bylaw are the stream separation, that threshold that I mentioned, increasing it, proposing clear bags, limiting the amount of mattresses that we accept at the landfill, which I didn't get into, but it's 5 mattresses instead of just unlimited. We've revised a few of the definitions, especially to align with the solid waste management plan of the SLRD. And then we've extended the scope. Originally, the current bylaw is only towards residential collection, and now it's extended to the business, community, institutions, multifamily homes, as well as events and temporary users. There is outreach. I did speak about it before in May, but just really high level. These are the things that we've hired the consulting team to help us with. So providing workshops, train the trainer sessions for businesses, developing some guidance documents to help us training materials and signage that can be downloaded from our website, as well as social media content and kind of ongoing communications content, because this isn't going to be a 1-month campaign. This is really going to be an ongoing communications, integrating it into everything the District of Squamish is kind of putting out there, so our e-news and things like that, and just really working with folks to kind of get on board. Just wanted to speak to the enforcement side of things. So as I mentioned, the progressive enforcement, I did walk through this a little bit earlier, but it's really just highlighting this working on education, working with the businesses and residents, and general community engagement, and then bylaw infractions being reported and discussed and followed up with, an education package, for example, and then follow up with notices and warnings for those who have been out of compliance. And the large part of this is that it would be done by the sustainability coordinator at the District of Squamish. When this solid waste bylaw, if the solid waste bylaw is adopted by council, there would be also changes to the MTI and the bylaw notice enforcement bylaws to ensure that the sustainability coordinator and perhaps a few other positions within the engineering department might have or will have the authority to kind of conduct this business, so it won't be fully reliant on our bylaw team. Additionally, the mixed waste rate would be increased within like 1 year to give it that chance to kind of for people to adopt. Enforcement tools that really, we want to approach this kind of twofold for several reasons. The first one is increasing the mixed waste rate. Right now it's $320 a ton. We consistently see folks at the landfill who are willing to pay that amount versus separating, businesses within the community in particular. And it has been found in discussion with other municipalities that this is, not in discussion with municipalities, but this is a partially effective enforcement mechanism for us because it's very effective when it's one business going to the landfill and dropping off their load. They know exactly what they're putting in and why they're getting billed. However, in Squamish, we have the situation where often trucks go through multiple pickups and then the cost is kind of passed down to everyone. So say one business is doing something really like doing a great job at separating, there's a chance that the mixed waste rate could just be passed on to them anyway because their load is mixed in with everybody else's. Depends on the hauler. Haulers also sometimes absorb the cost. So the cost isn't always obvious to the businesses when they get charged the mixed waste rate. So it's very effective at times, but sometimes it's not as effective as we'd like it to be. That's why we'd like to couple it with kind of a penalty or one-time fine, which would be done through spot checks and audits. In combination with education and follow-up, it has been found to be very effective because people get that one-on-one opportunity to learn where their mistakes are, and then it doesn't have to be done as frequently, is what other municipalities have found. And there will be an initial focus on those who have already gone through that kind of education warning process. So that's the enforcement tools. And then just a real brief overview of the timeline. We came to council in May, and then we, throughout June, we did the stakeholder engagement. We're here again in July presenting kind of the changes and feedback that we heard from the community. And then as soon as or when the bylaw is adopted, the outreach support would start right away, and then progressive enforcement will begin kind of slowly as we were working through the education piece. So, we're open to discussion and answer all your questions. And we kind of whipped through that. So
if council has specific questions for clarification purposes before we sort of get into the meetings on it, Councilor Reyes, Councilor Glasgow, Councilor Chanel.
Well, I have a number. I'll do them one at a time if you can speak. But so, for example, with the mixed rate going up to 20%, tolerance going up to 20%. So if we have something like recycling, for example, that has more than 20% contamination, then it's considered garbage, and they charge the garbage rate. Am I correct in saying this? Would that be the example, or one of the examples?
the mixed waste rate usually applies to only garbage.
So garbage that has more than 20% recyclables or organics would be charged the mixed waste rate.
I see.
As
So
opposed
it's
to
the other way around.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. If it's pure garbage that's supposed to go in the landfill, then it has a much reduced rate. I don't know what the per ton rate is on that, but it's much less than.
150.
So it's less than half
It's
if you
less.
separate.
That,
And so I was thinking of it from the other end. I mean, if you had
yeah.
recycling, for example, or organics that had contamination, and then I guess the question is, what do you do with them?
Then-
Because you can't send them off where they should be going to.
Yeah, and so then it would basically, that load would become garbage and it would be charged to mixed waste rate because say they have 40% garbage and 60% recyclables, right? Now they have, if you flip it, it's the same. They've now contaminated their garbage by 60% recyclables.
So contaminated recyclables and compost would actually get charged the mixed waste
that's a-
rate.
Yep,
Yeah, it's a
exactly.
good,
Because it actually creates a lot more waste that should not be in the waste. Does that make sense, Councillor Reyes?
Yep,
Yeah.
no, I got it.
thank you.
So, I've got others, but I'll step
Yeah,
up
we'll
and
just
come
keep
back.
going around the room. I just want
Sure.
to make sure we're focusing on questions because, and then we'll get into opinions on it. Jason?
So the threshold for mixed waste,
And-
what is the comparables in other jurisdictions? Like what's a typical rate?
Metro Vancouver locations have several different rates. They've got kind of a mixed bag, but varying between, I would say, 5 to 25%. They say kind of construction demolition, or if it's over 50 kilos, it's this threshold. It's kind of a complicated matrix. Whistler's is 25%. They also are on a reduction scheme as us. Generally, I've seen it between 5 is very low. It is a very ambitious and good target as well, but generally they're like between 15 and 25%.
Susan?
Thanks. The privacy bags, I'm just curious if there's been any problems or in other municipalities with people actually stealing things that are just privacy bags, or concerns with the public of having something that's labeled private go to somewhere where it's going to be public. So people pick up the garbage bags, they empty it out, but your private bags are actually separated. So is there concern, was there concern about having the privacy bags before it was just all mixed in?
So maybe the beginning of the question is, what types of items are going to be in the
Yeah.
privacy bags? If someone's stealing privacy bags, then
No,
they have a problem.
Exactly. But if it's, you rip up Visa receipts and you put them into your privacy bag, and, you have a privacy bag that's separated because you want things to be private and not looked at,
Yeah.
for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, most of that stuff, it's all paper, it should go in the recycling bin, but, or shredded or whatever, you have to take care of your own privacy issues. But the privacy bags, maybe that's a misleading word. It's for female hygiene products, maybe baby
Medical.
waste, medical disposal stuff that they don't want to know someone's on
Right.
dialysis or something. So it's those types of things, not, Visa bills should be, is paper should be in recycling anyway. so.
Mhm. And
So just to clarify what, maybe that's a misleading term, privacy bag.
and it will be, I mean, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but the privacy bags or the opaque bags will be going to the same place as the clear bags, if that makes sense. Like,
Right, but are the public concerned at all? Or I guess one of the concerns that I would have is that you're actually labeling something as private, and now you're going to have it separated. Is that not a concern? Or
Has that come up in
people-
other communities?
Yeah, has
it
it
hasn't been
There's
raised
been
in all
no
the
concerns
research
about-
I've done, no.
sorting through private bags?
No.
Maybe the sort of thing that the first couple of privacy bags people open up, they decide it's
Oh,
not the
no.
kind of thing they want to steal.
Excellent. And can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Chilliwack has a pilot going on apparently that they're doing bins and cameras instead of garbage, like square bins that know the locations and
Mhm.
can measure the garbage.
Yeah.
Did
By
staff
weight, you
look
mean?
into? Yeah, they're new trucks that actually have cameras on and measure where you are and what's in the bins.
I believe, sorry, your question is, have we looked into it?
Yeah,
So there has, before I joined the district, there was some research done into it. And we have in our contract with Kearney's Waste Systems is for them to also continue looking at the technology around it. From what I understand, it's around $10,000 per truck. And as our trucks are, we have a contracted system, so it would need to be negotiated into the contract.
okay,
When
thank you.
when is the next contract up?
This contract is good
Renewal.
until 2019.
Ted?
Yeah, thanks.
Karen?
Glass goes in the garbage?
It can go, well, it can go in the garbage, it shouldn't. It should go to the recycle depot at, on Queens Way.
Okay, so that's something we have to deal with. Compost. You know, if you read the top of your compost bin, if you go out and clean up your yard, half the stuff you can't put in there. I mean, I end up putting invasives in my compost pump. So that, to me, is a huge flaw.
So your question is?
Well, I'm just on the compost, what do you do with your invasives? They go in the garbage then?
Yeah, and unfortunately invasives should be going into the garbage because, real quick, is that just because our compost, our residential compost goes to CSI Soils, which
Yeah.
has a good rate of killing invasives, but it's not 100% guaranteed, so
I know.
yeah, invasives are a concern.
And then the one that I thought we were gonna deal with sooner than later was demo. Site demolition. You have all these demolitions coming up, and I thought we were gonna up the rate of that to increase people's recycling.
So demolition will be covered, so they're under the definition of temporary users of a site, and they would be falling underneath this, you must separate. And so that's kind of the key. And then they are, often demo jobs go directly to landfill. That's one of those cases where they see their bills and
But they just crunch up the house and then take the drywall out, crunch it up, and then
but we see the wood waste that's ending up there.
I just thought we'd make people dismantle before they,
Yeah.
and then.
So I mean, ultimately, that's a goal. How is that dealt with in the strategy in terms of outlining the goal to separate construction waste?
Sorry, I missed the question.
How is
Oh, how is it?
separation of construction waste outlined within the goals within this waste strategy?
In the bylaw, it's not outlined, except for the fact that demo, construction companies, they all fall underneath that temporary user piece, which is also regulated to separate. But underneath the zero waste strategy, one of the the third priority was to develop guidelines for construction, demolition, separation, which would be the next project on.
Yeah. So we can anticipate that coming back in a year from now kind of thing, or what's the timeline on it?
Oh, we don't have a timeline right now, it's kind of, I don't know, look to Chris.
Well, what I'm
But
suggesting is
it
council may want to discuss that timeline.
Yeah,
Sure.
please.
Yeah.
And I guess so first of all, they're required by this bylaw to separate, and they'd be subject to the new, in 1 year, increased even more mixed waste rate, if they didn't, plus fines, if they don't. We also have the pilot project running right now at Kearney's where we're paying Kearney's to separate out these loads. So these loads come in and they say, I'll just pay the mixed waste rate, I've got bags of money, I don't care. Then they take them to the back and we pay Kearney's to separate those out so they're not going to landfill. And that was part of the budget from last year to a stopgap measure on this until we can develop these improved guidelines.
Yeah, because usually they just crush it right up to pulp.
Yeah.
You know, and we know the building just over here on Third is going to be coming down soon, the Mountain FM building. That's a pretty big building. And also the racing company building's coming down. Pac West already came down, and they just, anyway, I
So,
thought.
no, I think it's worth exploring, is if council wants to ramp this up, because we're looking at a number of demolitions in the next 6 months, to make sure that our demolitions are appropriately diverting. How can we do that?
Well, we already, I guess it's a conversation I need to have with Kearney's to make sure that the pilot program is operating. We can, through the progressive enforcement, we have the ability, once we pass this bylaw, to issue fines. each one of these needs a demolition permit, which would be through the building department. So I could work with the building department to make sure we have an education package going out for these big ones. You know, they can let me know when there's a big one, and we can make sure they know what the consequences are of just grinding it all up into a bunch of trucks and trucking it out there and thinking it's all gonna go into the landfill.
No, just to explore this a little more, does it have to be contracted out to Carney's? Separation, I mean, there's actually some
Multiple
companies
locations
emerging
in town,
because
yeah.
of these rules, and they actually go in there and do that. So we wouldn't necessarily have to contract with Carney's for this. We have to create the opportunity in the regulation, and might actually create some business opportunities for other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So they can contract with anybody they like to separate out. We, at this point, have the pilot program with Carney's. When a load shows up at the landfill, they can flag it and charge the mixed waste rate, but instead of putting it on the active face, they roll it into their yard at the back and then pile it up and rip it apart there, which I think is probably the only practical way to do it for the last chance items. But certainly any business can contract to separate out.
And we have had a couple of meetings, there was one meeting with, between development services, so planning, building, engineering. We were all at the table discussing how construction demolition sites, we can inform them during the construction phase, but also the demolition. And so I am building like a package to be given out to, or information kind of brochure to be given out to folks.
And as Councillor Pryor said, we need to be proactive. We know which sites are gonna be demolished, at least within the next year likely. We need to be proactive at working with those companies to make sure they divert.
Well, the ones on Government Road, there was
Okay.
eight houses out there.
Yeah.
We talked about this before those houses.
Let's move on, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna move on, Ted, I'll come back to you.
like-
I'll come back to you. There's a lot of people, everyone has a ton of questions, so we're just going around the room. Karen, then myself, and Doug, and Jason, and Ted.
So one of the concerns around the clear plastic bags was people's privacy, even if you have an opaque bag. So I know there'll be education enforcement for institutional and businesses and multifamily, but will there be spot checks? Like someone would come into my neighborhood and open up my bin and look in my bag?
The intention is that there could be,
There could, okay.
yeah, and maybe to focus on, one neighborhood or something.
So we need to, can we go to Joe?
Yep.
So, I mean, that does tie into the enforcement aspect, and I know we've had some discussion with engineering, particularly in multi-family units, like in any location. The spot checks talking about, we need to follow a process, which is saying to you or whomever, giving you notice that we're coming on your property to check. So that kind of can defeat the purpose, but it is a requirement by law that we do that. Now, if the garbage is put out to the curb, then not so much. If multifamily units, stratas, even if they have a common location where everybody puts in their trash, which again, from a long-term perspective, I think is better than every multifamily unit, everybody having totes for different reasons. There's still an expectation of privacy there, so that creates a challenge. In the preferred approach really is a fees versus fines aspect, and having the contractor, if they have those cameras that you talked about on the trucks and they watch the container being dumped in and there's a whole bunch of black bags versus the white bags, we might be able to, then they would know which location it comes from. But it is a challenge to do a spot check without giving notice.
And I would just add to that, I think people are really interested in single-family homes and people running up and looking at garbage and that sort of thing. Single-family homes and the residential curbside pickup program is actually a fairly small percentage of our overall garbage. They're already separating. It's not our prime focus. I wouldn't want to take away the ability if we know we have a certain number of residences that there's just never a recycling tote out there. Our ability to find if we feel the need in the future. Our legal counsel have advised that once the tote is on the curb for pickup, that we have the okay. So it's a tool that we can use. It's not our primary focus, but that is in the quiver.
Ask one more. So I know people have been talking about dog waste, and diapers is the other one. I know when my kids were little, just to keep the smell factor down, diapers would go in a bag and you tie it up and throw it in your bin. So are we going to exclude diapers? Because it. You will learn this soon.
Yes.
It's overwhelming. Like, you need to capture that bag, and I can see households with young children are going to have a problem with just placing the raw diaper into the clear plastic bag. You know, and when you're out with your kids and you change a diaper, you put it in a plastic bag and you throw it out. If you're at someone's restaurant or whatever, that's the way you. So, I mean, at some point we got to be mindful that until we find a way to recycle diapers, they're going to show up in opaque bags, likely, in vast quantities.
That's a very good point. We did make an exception for dog waste, but we hadn't looked into diapers. I should have thought of that.
You'll think about it. Yeah.
Diaper genie bags are transparent. That's such a blue transparent thing. I have a lot of experience with.
So
That's a
maybe
good
building on that, I guess that's some of the challenge I have with this 20% issue is that if someone's really good at reducing their waste and they're diverting their organics 100%, they're diverting their recyclables, they actually have very little waste, but they got 2 kids on diapers. Very easily, their privacy or they could very easily go over their 20%. For the clear versus non-clear, and so I understand where Councillor Elliott is going with that, and I don't, as Chris said, that's not our intention. You know, if we go through waste and we see they're really good at waste, but they have a lot of diapers, we're not going to penalize them for that. That's not the intent of the law. So I think people do get a little wrapped up in letter of the law versus the intent of the law. But on the, I'm wondering if maybe you can elaborate a little bit on the tote-based communities that have seen success with clear bags, because I kind of get that, you know. So I wonder if you could be specific on which communities, what has the percentage diversion been in the communities with tote-based garbage systems like ours and clear bags, and the success rate of that program. Because if it's negligible, I just don't see the point in doing it, but if it's 20, 30%, then yeah, of course there's a point.
The main one that of the tote-based communities is Halifax, actually. So they are not. They have a. Just to clarify, every single municipality has very different garbage systems. So Halifax, what they allow is totes as well as clear bags at the curbside, so folks can have that choice. But so they do require clear bags, even though there are totes in the community. And they've seen, sorry, let me just look up the percentage again, because no, I believe it's between 34 and 40% reduction in the amount of waste that's going to their landfill or their garbage system.
And they have the same tote system as ours, automated tote.
They have
And
that.
that's what I'm looking for, tote-based system community.
I don't have a good example of automated totes. That have clear bags. It seems like a lot of the communities that have automated totes don't have clear bags.
Okay, your report said that there were communities with tote-based systems that have seen a reduction using clear bags, so I'm just trying to get those
Right,
examples.
sorry, I was referring to like garbage cans as totes as well.
Oh,
the
no, the
manual
automated
ones.
tote system like ours.
Right, no.
No, okay. I've got a few more questions, but I'll go around the loop again. We've got Doug, Jason, Susan, Ted.
So I wanted to clarify the setting out totes times in residential neighborhoods. My understanding is at the moment, so must not be set out earlier than 5 a.m. So we don't want people setting them out the night before, even if they're locked.
Yes, that's the intent.
So what is the difference between that and having them, because a lot of people in residential neighborhoods just store them outside, period. 24/7, locked up of course. And then garbage day, they move them out to the curb, unlock them, hopefully between the times we allow. But if we're telling them, there's also some, that one partner leaving early to go to work in the morning will take them out to the street, and typically it's the wife will go out and then unlock it before the truck comes.
Take that back.
Oh, Douglas.
The other partner, whoever they may be.
Just say the other spouse then.
Which is the stay at home with
He's
children
blushing even.
spouse. You get my point. Somebody comes out later and unlocks it. And so what we're saying is that you can't do that because it's outside the 5 a.m. time, for example. But really, is there any difference? Having it on the street locked up versus having it in front of the garage 20 or 30 feet away locked up? And is it necessary to be specific like that? Because the critical thing is, for me at least, seems to be, when is it unlocked? If it's locked up on the street versus locked up in front of your garage or the side of your house or something like that, I'm not sure it's a different attraction for a bear. And so do we need to even go there? And that leads me to the other point, and I can remember making this in one of our previous discussions on this point, is the fact that people do store them outside, and the smell is there, and they are available for bears to come and start chewing away on them for a couple of hours and eventually get into them in some cases. And so do we want to, as part of this program, start mandating for the next building and future construction that there must be a space provided for in the building for storing them during the week inside, because you locked or not, they still smell, and that's I think probably what attracts the animal and the shape of it and so forth, and the fact that it's out there and the other things. And as we've seen, there's been more and more cases. The bears are wising up. If they gnaw away at some certain area, they'll eventually get into these things, and so you do have them coming through the neighborhoods. So in one sense, I'm wondering if we're maybe over-prescribing, and in another sense, if we're under-prescribing and being maybe more prescriptive about future construction, future developments, substantial renovations, whatever it is. And certainly with commercial and multifamily, is there a way that those can be contained inside as opposed to outside, just to avoid the attractant in the first place?
Yeah. So first question, maybe Shannon might want to address the 5 a.m. not set it earlier, and then it could be Gary or Chris want to speak to the planning side of things. Maybe speak to the time. What's the difference between if it's 20 feet this way or 20 feet this way in terms of set out time versus unlocking time?
I can speak to that briefly because I'm in a home with a carport, not a garage, and my garbage is out available to the bears all the time. They're locked, and I have had my tote broken into by a bear and chased many others away. Well, a few others away. So I'm in exactly that situation, and that was my initial reaction as well, well, that doesn't make any sense, because I was thinking about my situation. But a large percentage of homes in Squamish do have a garage and do keep their garbage indoors when they're not rolling them out. So even if we can reduce the number of garbage totes that are available to the bears by 30% or 50%, I actually wish I had the number of how many are inside and outside. I don't, but we can reduce the number of totes that are out there, then that reduces the number of attractants for the bears. So for a case like me, it doesn't really make a difference, but for my neighbor who has theirs in the garage, it does make a difference. So it's an incremental change in that sense.
And just to follow up on that point, there are also, I can tell you, a large number of homes with garages where the occupants have chosen to keep the things outside of the garage, basically outside. So they had the choice, but the choice is outside.
I don't believe we mandate.
And we haven't mandated anything with that. No. So I guess it's an open question, and maybe it's not going to be decided here this afternoon, but whether we should start encouraging people to keep them inside and mandating it for future construction.
Yeah.
So on the mandating, I want to come back to the 5 AM because I want to contribute to that too, and there may be others, but on the mandating, how do we make sure any new builds, any redevelopment or renovation are considering the need for a space for this?
So,
We're actually, I think we're actually actively involved in starting to get into that sort of, those standards into the zoning bylaw and or development and area guidelines. Going forward, it's relatively,
the building, sorry to jump in here, because the building code is changing in the end of 2017, we won't be allowed to, local authorities will not have the authority to mandate waste rooms. So we're working.
Seriously?
Yeah.
no, that's not.
I don't believe that. I don't believe that. That doesn't make any sense.
In the building code.
And I think that can be fought in a court of law because
And that's
we have to
what we're
manage the
working on.
landfills, not the province. You got me going here.
I-
So that is absolutely something that we should not have to comply with through the building code because we have, and these have been proven in court, landfills are our cost.
Yeah.
Wildlife attractant are our issues. We need to do what we need to do to minimize those opportunities. And if the building code is preventing us from doing that, then there's a problem.
I don't believe it is. My read of the Building Act doesn't have that as a restricted area. Now, there are certain restrictions in the Building Act, and I'll go back and check. I've got it on my desktop here, but I don't believe the Building Act provides for waste disposal facilities as a restricted area. So I think we can on a go-forward basis, and I know we're active on the multifamily.
We're
On the
definitely looking at it.
single-family, on the existing development, some of the difficulties I can foresee is we've got a lot of newish development in the last few years that's single-car garages. Doesn't work very well with trying to keep a vehicle and solid waste totes and recycling totes. So there would be some difficulty trying to sort of even retroactively encourage in some instances. Double car garages, yeah, singles just gets a lot tricky.
Okay, we're not going to answer this
Yep.
today, but I think council's looking at ways that we can create through redevelopment and new development, ways to consider the fact that we need X by X square footage to have 3 totes at a bare minimum.
Yeah, and
So
We're
we're
working on
expecting that to come back. Okay? We'll come back to this 5 AM thing unless somebody else wants to chime in right now. Jason, Susan, Ted.
And just on that last one though, let's also keep in mind too that if you're actually doing the separation properly, the only bin that needs to be inside or protected is the organics. And if we get to a point where we're collecting on a weekly basis throughout the year, then hopefully that will be less of a problem. And also a further incentive for people to actually separate properly, because then your garbage and your recycling would not be interesting for mayors. My question is more around sort of the philosophy of this, because I sort of see how the approach seems to be about education and then fines and enforcement, but specifically on the construction waste. I mean, what is stopping us from basically setting like doubling the tipping fee for mixed construction waste, with the idea that, you know, if people don't want to separate or they just want to pay, because I think that's really what it is. It's, people know what they should be doing, generally speaking, but it's just more expedient, and especially in construction, everything happens as quickly as possible and as cheaply as possible. So why don't we just, you know, cut all the administration out of it and say, no, if you have mixed construction waste, you're paying double the tipping fee, and we're going to use that extra revenue to do a sorting contract with whatever contractors we have, and then just, you know, take that out of the equation. So I just think that that would be way more effective, and money changes people's behavior more than anything else, especially when you're talking about businesses, where they do have choices, and, you know, who knows, maybe some of them will choose to ship it somewhere else, and, you know, then it's no longer our specific issue. But I think also too, like, yeah, you have to pay for it. I mean, otherwise it's the citizens of Squamish that pay for expanding our landfill all the time. So I would like to see more of a focus on the commercial construction waste and all of that, and I'm still a little bit leery of going after residents. I don't know if we've taken all the opportunities we can to crack down on the commercial side of things to really get that per capita number down. And I would like to see us, you know, I'm moving into the comments phase, I suppose.
Yeah, you are.
But just want to sort of set the table for that a little bit, to say that I think, you know, we have unexplored opportunities there that maybe we should explore first before really going after.
Yeah, so I'm gonna just park that, commercial and demolition. We're gonna park that because I think council wants to be a little more proactive on that front. Thanks, Jason. Susan?
Thank you. And I would agree with those, except for the majority of our community is residential. But I don't disagree with using those fines. There should also be financial incentives. If we've ever explored financial incentives for good behavior, we're constantly finding the fines end up costing the people that are behaving well money as well. And if you're going after all commercial businesses, not all commercial businesses, like my clinic's a zero waste facility. If you do this for all commercial businesses, I end up paying.
So are you thinking an opposite system that everyone pays X and if you
have an expensive fee for garbage, and because if you're creating garbage,
and then if you can prove that you've diverted.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and have some sort of, XYZ if you're complying with this, and maybe have a certification, a district certification of zero waste for businesses that are compliant, because that encourages people to, and it also incentivizes business to obtain a certificate that is, okay, I'm zero waste. And that also is something that you can advertise.
Yeah, so a good suggestion. And can we, when you looked at your research versus what Councillor Chabot was saying, that this is the fee and you get an incentive, or you get your money back, or you get a lower rate, or this is the rate, if you're bad, you get this rate. It's a bit of a psychological thing. In your research, are there communities that do either or, and have there been different success rates?
I believe Metro Vancouver is, and I would have to look into it to get the fine details on it, but they are they're either have or launching a deconstruction bylaw, which is kind of the next step. And usually in a deconstruction bylaw, in particular, I'm talking construction demolition, is that you get money back once you're able to prove that your wood waste went to X and you were able to separate.
I would also, I'd like to go one step further and actually be like, I want a sticker on my door.
I think that's another issue. I think Shannon was writing that down. I think being able to use it as a promo that you are a zero waste and you are actually not burdening regular utility user by not. So yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. I saw Shannon writing.
Can I bring up one more point? It's about diapers.
Sure.
So the diapers, 17% of our landfill is diapers. That is political suicide to even discuss this, but it's like that is a huge percentage of diapers entering our landfill.
70% of our landfill, or 17% of residential waste?
It was 17% of the multifamily home
Yeah.
waste
By
Of multi-fund.
weight.
by weight.
By weight.
I believe it was
So
multifamily.
I think that's an important point, as somebody who's struggled with their recent baby to go to cloth diapers, although we were very successful with the first. Diapers are really heavy because there's a lot of fluid, but they don't take up a lot of airspace because it's so dense. And so when we,
That is a good
but garbage is all about tonnage because you've got a scale and it's really easy to measure, right?
Right.
And so I think my garbage can is probably 40% diapers by weight, but probably 10% by volume. It's just, they're heavy
So
and
another
everything else
innovative
is.
municipal
So
way to
I
deal
just
with
wanted to get
this.
this stats right,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's really interesting information. But, you know, prime business for somebody to set up in Squamish is diaper delivery service and pickup and washing, because that doesn't exist in Squamish. There's a gap in our economy that needs to be filled, and it needs to be encouraged by the municipality. Maybe it ends up being that we incentivize business licensing, or, you know, like the businesses that actually reduce
with our
waste.
goals, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you know, but, you know, having it be, like, here are the businesses that are gapping in our town because they reduce waste to landfill and are good for the Squamish local environment. That we're going to do X, Y, Z.
Yeah, I know Councillor Spells has brought up this before, so have I. Some municipalities actually compost or divert diapers to
Yeah,
the,
Toronto.
Toronto being the big one. Can you maybe articulate?
I've done some research into it. By no means is it extensive, so I can't speak to exactly what's happening in Toronto, but there was a Canadian company that developed a diaper recycling facility based out of Ontario, so it might be the same company that's servicing Toronto. Unfortunately, it's probably not the same one that's servicing Toronto, they've closed their facility in Mississauga now, because what they found was that they needed the volume, and they also couldn't compete because a lot of municipalities in that area started sending their garbage down to the US because landfills are cheaper, incineration, things like that. So they've moved their facilities to the UK, which has higher volume and like not as much space and things like that. So, however, their technology is for sale. And I did find a California county, I believe it is, or maybe it's a municipality that bought it for $750,000 it was in 2003. So bear with me, the numbers probably have changed by then. So there is technology out there. I think we would have to look into volume and whether we have that like amount, the supply for something like that. I do think that this might be an issue we can raise. I'm in contact with people at Metro Vancouver. Maybe it's something I can bring to the table in those discussions with my peers to say, is anyone looking at bringing a facility there? Because that might be more effective. And then, I'm not sure though, I'm just kind of...
On that point, to the economy of having people enforce garbage, whether it's more, you know, even looking at wages, is it cheaper to pay sorters, as Councillor Black and Wolf mentioned? You know, when do we get to the point where we just actually want to sort our garbage? Because we want to make sure that we're absolutely getting even the 5% and separating it all and having people at the end. And Smith Wright, it's not Carney's anymore, I think it's Smith Wright. Maybe they have innovative technology or better technology uses than having we had a small local company, now we have a larger mainline company. So maybe there are better technology resources and things that we can start, even if it's not now because we don't have population density, but in the future, looking towards these savings of and economies of scale where the enforcement's going to cost more than sorting. We have to figure out what that tipping point is and be able to weigh those economic factors as far as like forcing the public, paying for education, making people go and check people's garbages, which seems rather invasive to me. It's people coming into your yard or into your garage to make sure you're sorting, as opposed to people at the end making sure that you get all the garbage sorted. Maybe a better economy of scale.
A few items in there. I do want to clarify that nobody will be or can legally be going into your garage and checking and making sure
It's
you're
only
sorting.
when the garbage is out on the curb.
Once it's on the curb,
Okay.
that's a different thing. And also clarify that Carney's was purchased by Mr. Smith, whose family also started Smith Wright, but Carney's is not owned by Smith Wright. It's a little bit of a, it's a little bit
I was just
confusing.
reading the article in the Chief that said Carney's bought by Smith Wright. And Recycle
Okay.
DC also said that they were
Smith
bought
Wright
They're
bought
not-
Carney's, it's
Okay.
maintained as a separate entity under their
Right.
corporate structure, but it is
Okay.
owned by the same
It is
parent.
owned by-
Okay, sorry, I had that almost right, but not quite.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shannon, for bringing us all the way there. So, the other point that you brought up that I don't think we were able to address was incentive versus fining. I think that definitely as a philosophy, I think that's great. If you get certified, then you get a reduction and that sort of thing. I think as part of our rollout and as part of our campaign, it's possible once somebody's done and they can show, look, I did this, then somebody like Squamish could be issuing a certification program and the sticker for the window and it goes on your website and all that sort of thing. I don't think as far as an overall, if you're certified with this, then you get a lower rate at the landfill or with your waste hauler, which is a private contract. That would mean that staff or consultants would need to certify every single business in town in a timely manner and keep them certified. And I think the staff burden to do that would be considerable versus being able to judiciously use fines where we feel we need to.
I don't think I said and/or, I think fines are an awesome idea. I just think that there's a better way to incentivize people to do better behaviors. And as we discussed, financial is probably the best way.
Mhm.
So fining people that are not compliant with the garbage haul, but if you're saying that people can do 20% still of mixing their waste, it's gonna be 40 to 50%. And we're getting down to 5% is gonna be really hard. So if you wanna encourage people to be,
We want to find the most efficient way
Exactly.
of diversion, and I think we try to make sure the municipalities help
Yeah.
inform.
and not to burden staff, but, and not with haul rates or anything else, but it has to be, make it something simple like zero waste. Like, we're not gonna be hauling anything, we're actually not creating waste. Zero waste is a great strategy, and it's possible.
And just on the diaper one, my understanding with Toronto is they included diapers in their compost because people complain about smell, and actually fish the diapers out.
That's very disappointing.
It is
I
very
was so excited
disappointing,
to
and
put
it's
diapers in a
misleading,
little blue
so.
box outside.
And the other conversation that's happened with a lot of municipalities is like the one is like,
Yeah,
when we consider our weight reduction goals in terms of diversion, diapers, as Chris demonstrated, are disproportionately heavy. And so they should maybe not be considered as part of that equation. This was the experience in Toronto because ultimately the diapers do get fished out, get put in the waste stream. So anyway,
Stagnant is such a
because
great resource.
there's just too much plastic in them. So I mean, but that's
But
where
plastic's recyclable, Stagnum is recyclable, all the components, it's just,
all the components are.
that's 750K.
But the interesting piece to that is if we can create some sort, if we can find companies that are helping us achieve our zero waste goals, and through our fee system, be able to encourage those businesses, then that, maybe that's something we can look at. And I know we're limited by the legislation on what we can and can't do, but maybe there's some wiggle room there.
Just to raise one other thing on that is that in my discussions and meetings with this kind of food recovery group, we have discussed, there are other, it's being discussed about tax incentives for businesses who donate food instead of throwing it out or putting it into compost. It's an issue that we're all paying attention to. Kind of came to the agreement that at this point in time, the systems that we have in place in Squamish aren't there yet to accommodate the amount of food that would suddenly be diverted to them. However, we are kind of keeping an eye on what are other communities doing around that.
I have Ted, Karen, Doug, and just cognizant of time, we're running a little bit over time. already.
I'm just gonna switch the subject and go to drywall for a second. Now, when someone does tear down their house, they rip all the drywall out and they put it in their truck and drive it up to the landfill and they say, sorry, we can't take that, you have to go to Whistler. And then you drive up to Whistler and they go, oh, well, we don't take that anymore either. And you have to drive out to Surrey or Langley. Why don't we have a bin for the old drywall? And just charge.
We
it.
did talk about this last time, but go ahead.
Then you're
First of all, I hope we're not sending to Whistler if they don't accept drywall.
No,
Well,
there's
usually, all of a sudden they stop.
sign, I think there's a sign at the landfill. If not, we were giving out notices for a while
They
when the
stop.
transition happened. And a notice went out to kind of construction companies in town. So yeah, Whistler stopped taking asbestos-containing drywall and we don't accept it. It is something we can look into. We have done a bit of initial research into it, and it's an exorbitant cost. I know that Regional District Nanaimo charges $500 a ton for asbestos-containing drywall. So we will need to do the research into how much will it cost us to accept it, and also what would the fee be, and is at $500 a ton. You know, with tipping fees, we walk a fine line between encouraging people to throw out responsibly and then illegal dumping, and we need to speak to the construction community to see, would you pay this? Would this be worth your money? Does that make sense to drop it off?
It would be convenient for people in the valley to have a place to dump it rather than drive it to Surrey. And it doesn't really matter what it costs.
You charge what it costs.
Yeah.
Like, it's-
I'm just
Of course,
thinking
yeah.
it would be convenient if you'd have to have a nice sealed bin, of course. And just have it off to the side and it might take 3 months to fill it up. But
So this is something you're looking into?
We haven't been actively looking into it recently. When Whistler shut down or stopped taking asbestos-containing drywall, we did look into it. The scenario of just having a bin off to the side, unfortunately, Whistler was shut down due to WorkSafe BC issues, so there's a considerable cost. It would need to set up around it and kind of
No,
special
just on
handling.
that, can we not, maybe I'm simplifying things, can we not put an RFP out saying, does someone want to set up an asbestos bin, charge a fee for transport? Here's a spot on our landfill to do that business. Could we not do something as simple as that? It doesn't have to go to the existing contract. I don't know, I'm not saying we
we
want to do it,
could.
but we want to discourage people from throwing in the woods.
course.
That's the bottom line. They set up the fees, they'll set up a fee that covers their costs, they can even make money on it, I don't care, we can't make money on it, that's the challenge. So, maybe it's as simple as that.
It's not a bad idea. I think we'd have to understand exactly what it would look like from a WorkSafe BC standpoint. Right now, we basically tell people, you can go to Surrey, or you can hire a company that works with hazardous materials, and they know how to deal with it, and they know where to take it, and they can deal with it responsibly. It's more than, even just having a bin on the side that we don't touch, but the other company does, you still have a lot of dust issues. In a very small sort of recycling area there for our staff and for the public there. So we'd have to explore that, but I think it's worth exploring. If one of these hazardous materials companies would be interested in setting that up, well, I think we could probably give them the square footage.
Yeah, and then it might reduce truck driving down to Surrey and reduce some waste in the woods if that's an issue. Anyway, sorry, one more and then we're...
So that one, and then I was on Squamish Speaks Facebook standing up for our zero waste thing for the last couple of days and some interesting conversations with people. And
Thank you.
where do you get small, clear bags? There's no place to get small, clear bags.
Yeah.
You idiots. I'm just having fun. But there is no small, clear bags.
Nesters, I think, has them, but I think they're the only one that has them, correct?
Well, I was thinking the district could sell small bags.
The intent is to work with the retailers in town. I haven't approached them yet because we haven't
Well, right now,
kind
there's
of
no
hit
small
that.
bags, so they say.
So, and that's part of the reason we have a one-year phase-in, because when you have 20,000 customers looking for small clear bags, in theory, people will
Yeah.
have them
The
available.
grocery stores and the Walmarts and the, wherever you buy grocery bags, Canadian Tire, if no one's buying the opaque bags, they're gonna sell the clear bags. I mean, the market will determine that. So I'm not worried about that. The market will determine if green bags aren't selling and clear bags are selling, they'll sell clear bags. The market will determine itself on that one, but it needs some time.
I do have another comment in the end.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Karen?
Since this bylaw is open, can we add some wording in section 4.3 around where to place your bin when you have a bike lane in front of your home?
Yes, Robin?
That's in the traffic bylaw, and it's very clearly designated. You are not to park your tote in a bike lane or on a sidewalk. The arms are have a 12-foot reach, so people can certainly keep their totes in their driveway, and the truck will stop and get them. It's a matter of education and enforcement, so going out, putting stickers. When we first brought the bike lanes on government, especially in the Buckley government type area, we had some stickers that we put on, and we can resurrect that. And district staff who were seeing this, because it was education, were putting the stickers on the totes.
Give stickers to me, I'll go put them on.
I'll ride by on my bike and put them on.
I got
But-
them on my cans.
Maybe in the traffic bylaw, but there's specific wording in here that says, must be placed on the boulevard in front of the premises and as close to the curb, or where no curb is present, the roadway portion of the highway as possible
So
without
that's-
creating obstruction.
I think we need to fix
So
that
we need to clarify
before it
wording
gets any
here
rain.
so that it matches what's in our traffic bylaw. That's all I'm saying, is if this bylaw is open and coming for readings, we should fix it.
Absolutely, yes.
I would prefer that it just simply say in accordance with the traffic bylaw, and then we don't have to worry about
Perfect.
language jiving. We just,
Yeah. And I always find it a little bit of a pain for the consumer to have to go to this bylaw and that bylaw.
Yeah.
So if there's an actual reference in the traffic bylaw, just
Yep.
take that, put it in there.
well, yeah, so if we amend it, so it's.
Yeah, but we need to make
We'll
it
make
easy
it
for
very
reader to
easy.
read. Okay,
That's the goal.
thank you.
And yeah, council could be part of the enforcement team when we're on our bikes.
Absolutely. I'll just stick
Education
those.
team, it's the education team, we're all
Education.
educated.
Doug?
Thanks, and I put my hand up in anticipation of this moving into the comment period portion of the meeting, so
Can I ask one more question?
go ahead.
So on this, Jason said something that tweaked my brain about the 5 AM, not setting out to 5 AM. And for me, I actually have to push my thing quite a distance. So sometimes I'll just leave them out there and I won't put any garbage in them until, like they're just out on the road, empty. Because it's a pain in the butt to put it down my hill and back up the hill. And it's easier sometimes to just bring one garbage bag and put it up there than pushing this massively heavy thing sometimes. So, and the other thing too, I think it was, can't remember who, but it's really only the organics that needs to be inside. I think it was Jason. And that if people are diverting garbage, waste stream should not have any attractants in it. Recycling should not have any attractants in it. So ultimately, it shouldn't matter if those things are out there. And the garbage technically has clips, but recycling doesn't have clips. I just kind of am along where Doug is like, are we really achieving having people keep their stuff in their garage longer? For me, I would prefer to have it out on the curb than have the garbage right beside my house and actually bringing animals in closer to my house. So I think there's pros and cons here, that I know we want people to keep it in their garage, but at the same time, I don't want the garbage beside my house. And I walk out the door and my garbage is there and there's a bear there. I'd rather have it further away. So I just sort of see this 5 AM, I think it gets confusing. 9 AM to 5 PM needs to be unlocked, needs to be on the road.
Comes to my house shortly after 8. So it's 8
And it doesn't come to my house till 4:35 in the afternoon. Whatever the time is. But I think we're just getting a little bit confusing. Cannot set before 5 AM, but has to be unlocked at 8 AM. It just seems a little bit confusing to this ambiguous thing whether or not people are actually gonna keep it in their garage longer. And I'd say most people don't keep in the garage, we wish they would. On that,
Yes. So our wild safe coordinator brought this forward, so there is a reason, and I don't think anyone's asked the reason why this has been proposed. So what's the argument for this change, you know?
somebody answer, I don't care who.
Okay, we
Jeff.
were just looking amongst ourselves. So this recommendation or this idea came in late, and certainly I think there's more discussion as staff that we need to do, because it's even amongst staff we were having sort of some of the same points that you raised, Mayor Heinzman, and yourself, Councillor Race, about what's the difference between keeping it alongside your carport versus down at the roadway at a specified time. From an enforcement perspective, it's more straightforward for it to be, you can't have any bin on the roadway before X amount of time versus it locked or unlocked, but I think certainly some more discussion needs to happen. The Wild Safe coordinator, the recommendations clearly from her are if we properly divert, if we're cleaning our recycling, it's not an issue, and it is only the organics, and keeping that inside is the preference, because that's where the odor comes from. So I think there's, in a number of areas, some more work to be done on whether it's multifamily units having a cooperative or a combined area, changes in the bylaw to ensure that the organics bin is kept inside or in a secure area. So I think that we need to have some more discussion about what time a bin can or can't be out.
So we can pull that for now.
Well,
Comments?
I think we need to
Doug.
have some discussion.
Thank you. So, having messed up on the issue of which partner unlocks the garbage can, I am not going to touch diapers.
Move.
But drywall, that's a good point. And I think, generally the philosophy, I can understand it being a pain. It's complicated, there's health issues, etc. However, I would like us to try to broaden what we take at the landfill versus narrow it, because the reality is, if we don't take something like drywall, a lot of it does end up in the bush somewhere. And I think that's what we're trying to avoid. So there's a cost to it. People, I think, would probably pay it rather than drive to Surrey. They pay a lot of money rather than drive to Surrey. So I think, we ought to look into things like that. And now that there is a new owner of Carney's, they may have experience in the Lower Mainland. They may also have to deal with it as a part of a larger program, and so there's economies of scale. And I'm guessing, I really don't know. So I think we might just try to exploit some of their experience and see what we can add and enhance our landfill with. As far as Councillor Chappelle's idea of incentives, I think that it's not maybe the kind of thing we'll necessarily get to with this go-around, but I think that's something we shouldn't lose sight of, because when you think about it, if we concentrated, for example, with a pilot project for the ICI users, just because the numbers are smaller, but the volume that they create is quite disproportionately large, and the fees are somewhere up high, then we provide the incentive for them to certify, or whatever you qualify for some discount. And there's a number of things that can come with that that would solve other problems. And for example, as part of that program to get the lower rate, they could consent to spot audits. It's sort of a whole bunch of issues. And we could spot audit them and check their bins and stuff like that and make sure they are complying. And if they miss once or twice or 3 times a year or something like that, then their rates go up. So there's I think there's a lot of merit in some kind of program like that. We have to kind of think about all the issues, but approach it that way as opposed to just the fine part or just the education part, because education can be part of that too, because you educate them to get them into the program and et cetera, and they have to train up their staff, and there is a financial incentive to doing all that. So it's more than perhaps, as I say, this particular bylaw, but I think it's something we should not lose sight of and can really go at. We've heard all the comments about the bins in and out and whether they should be part of the construction stuff, so I'm not going to repeat that. Generally, I'm sort of in line with what we're doing here. Clear bags, I think, is an unfortunate issue that's popped up in the community, and I think we can go to that. And it has advantages. It forces people to think a little bit more. There's a whole bunch of reasons we can do that. I'm sure the market will pick up and make sure the shelves are stocked with these things if they know that's what we're doing. So those are the comments for this. I think we're kind of generally going in the right direction. But I think we can kind of tweak it, maybe in some cases go a little bit farther.
So I think, generally speaking, and maybe council just nod if you disagree, we want to create a very comprehensive system of incentives. Fine, we want to be most effective, whether it's through incentives or, so I think exploring some of the stuff that Councilor Chappell and others have talked about, we need to absolutely, unless someone disagrees with that, don't say anything. I have a quick question. Actually came through later this morning with regard to the recycling side of things. So my understanding is if people wanted a bigger garbage tote, they pay more. If people want a bigger recycling tote or have more than one recycling tote, we don't charge them extra for that, do we?
We only have one size of recycling totes in the community, the medium or 65-gallon size. I believe Kearney's offers the option for an extra pickup so that they can get weekly pickup, but that's a fee that the resident pays directly to to Kearney's.
So, I mean, the whole way our waste system is set up is that you pay for your garbage, and you get diversion of recycling and diversion of, we want to encourage those things. So my understanding when we started this whole system was essentially unlimited recycling is part of the cost. So in my mind, if someone wants an extra recycling tote, give them an extra recycling tote. If they're diverting more, and that we charge for the size of the garbage they're producing, not the size of the recycling they're producing. And I mean, that's how the whole thing was conceived of from the beginning. So if we have households that create a lot of recycling, just give them another bin.
I think it's an excellent point and something we can look into with Kearney's, what the cost would be, and look at the contract.
And those
But
costs
I think
need
it's
to
an
be,
important point.
First of all, I don't think many households are going to do it, but there might be the odd one out there. But that's calibrated not per the individual household that's recycling a lot, but calibrated in they need a big tote, small tote, a medium-sized tote on the waste side of things.
Mm-hmm.
We don't charge for recycling, theoretically. We don't charge for the size of the bin. So I mean, if a household has more recycling bin, it gets filled up every 2 weeks, give them another bin. Because otherwise, they're just going to stick it in their waste stream, and we want to discourage that. That was kind of a comment, not a question, sorry about that. Comments, Councillor Cryer.
I create more recyclable garbage. Well, I mean, my bin's overfull all the time. It's like the bag on top of the
Exactly.
Well, the comments, the compost one to me with the fine print that says don't put invasives in there, it always blows me away because I'm sure most people clean up the yard, they rake it up and they stuff it in there.
So what is the solution?
Well, it's just a flaw in the system. I don't know if there is a solution. I mean, you go out in the back and you've got ivy that's growing in your strawberries and you pull it out and you rake up your grass and you clip all your strawberries and you sweep it up in a pile and you stuff it in the bin. Well, the ivy's going in the bin. Or prickle bushes.
So that should go in the garbage.
That should go in the garbage.
Should
I
go in
mean,
the waste.
I do that now. I'm stuffing
Okay,
it.
good.
But I'm just saying it's a flaw. And I can't see a lot of people wouldn't even do that. And Susan brought it up, and actually when we started this program 2 or 3 years ago, when we first started talking about it, the question was asked, what's the best way to deal with garbage? And sorting is the best way. If we would just load everything in a truck and take it to a big warehouse where there was 10 people on both sides of a big conveyor belt, and we sorted it, that would be the best way to deal with our garbage, correct?
That would be the most complete way to remove anything that could be diverted. Best, I think, needs to also factor in cost.
Yeah, it would be
Yeah, I
think that'd be
significantly
cost
more
prohibitive.
expensive.
Well, I don't know about that.
Well, that was what was brought to us in previous reports.
You know, you start adding up all the costs, we keep adding, and we got an increase coming now. You know, again, we talk about an increase, oh, we're gonna need people to go out and police the plastic bags, and so that, we got another person, and, you know, I'm just saying that it's starting to add up, and I always thought, you know, a warehouse with people sorting is job. And, anyway.
Do you want to respond to that? I mean, my understanding was the costs were still so far apart that it wasn't worth doing and that this system was better, but
Well, I'd like maybe somebody to do a little bit of research on the costs, because we're spending a lot of money with totes and trucks and
are there any municipalities that do it the way Councillor Pryor is suggesting?
big cities do.
Not really, they tend to do it for recycling. Like the recyclables have conveyor belts and folks picking. I can't think of anybody off the top of my head, but
Anyway,
there might be.
and then I guess the last thing, just to follow up on what Councilor Ray said, maybe we will ask the new manager, owner of the landfill, if they would
We own the
consider
landfill.
the drywall stuff,
We own the landfill.
the runner.
Oh,
that's-
the contract.
Yeah.
But I think there's two things there. It's not just, we don't just have to go to Smith, right? We could basically say, here's a space, RFP, and they charge their own rates.
Well, if Smith Wright did it, would be simple, and we could get going right away.
And they probably have the cheapest bid. But I'm saying open it up to competition. Jason?
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate the objective. I don't necessarily agree with what's been put forward, specifically on the clear plastic bags and the enforcement side. I don't think people are quite ready for that in a lot of ways, and I think we need to be mindful of the fact that we have made significant changes, especially for the curbside collection process in terms of organics and things like that. And I think that this goes a little bit too far at this point in time. So I'm not very supportive of the clear plastic bag and the enforcement piece. What I would rather see, and what I think would be interesting to look at, kind of based on what Councillor Pryor was saying, the fact that most of the growth in terms of the housing type in our community is going to be now multifamily going forward, right? So we should really be focused on the multifamily aspect of things, and are there ways, does this present new opportunities for centralized collection, in townhouse complexes that will save some money and then allow us to do this sorting of the waste. And I would like to see something more in that vein, as well as an increase in tipping fees for commercial waste, because I think people will take it upon themselves as businesses to reduce their tipping, their garbage disposal costs, and to me that's more effective than the little plastic bags.
Thanks.
So one, I think we need to do some more homework on demolition waste and understand what it would cost for someone to hire a firm to take down a house properly versus just crushing it up. And then we should charge a premium at the landfill to encourage that business to go to other businesses who will take it apart properly. So I think it's important for us to disincentivize the crushing it up, throwing it in a bin, and taking it to a landfill. On the enforcement, I think just coming down to resources, to me it's going to focus on the ICI group before it touches residential. I don't have a problem with the clear plastic bags as long as we eliminate things like you know, sort of, don't force the diaper issue battle back for our dog waste, and increase the size of the opaque bag. And I think we should not call it privacy bag. I think we should call it opaque bag. Yeah, I think the other piece, if we do our homework about how much volume is potentially out there with the drywall, then we might be able to make a case. It's not knowing whether we actually have the volume to make it worth someone's while to set up a very safe and secure asbestos collection system. And we got to make sure we're not creating risk for our employees and the Carmen's employees. So I certainly don't want to, and we should look into it, but I think there's much more to do. But I think we focus our attention on the people that create the most waste, and that's the ICAC.
Just with regard to commercial demolition, I think what I'm hearing from council is we want to target that. We want to make sure we're being proactive about, especially those big demolitions that are coming up, and making sure they're diverting. I'm kind of the same mind as Councillor Black and Wolf on the clear bags, particularly with the automated totes. It's different when you have a garbage man that pours out something and they can have the clear bags there and they can have a look. But with this automated tote system, until we have cameras or some way of actually doing it, I just don't think that's where our bang for a buck is. And as Councillor Elliott was saying, I think focusing it more on, and Councillor Black and Wolf, and pretty much what everyone's saying is, let's focus on where we have a problem, the biggest problem. You said earlier, single-family homes are generally doing a pretty good job. That's not our challenging area. Commercial waste is a challenging area. Multifamily complexes, some of them don't have any diversion yet. Some of them don't landfill here, but some of them don't have any diversion yet. And the demolition waste and some of the challenges around a drywall, I think, maybe at some point we'll get to a point where we have cameras in the things and the clear plastic, you'll see a bang for the buck there. And until there's some proof of another municipality seeing a direct result of going to the clear plastic, I'm not sure it's necessary at this point. That's my perspective. I just want council to reflect on the major changes that are up on your screen to make sure I think the mattresses, I didn't hear any comments around mattresses, everyone's fine with that. The mixed waste threshold, I think it needs to be really clear. If we're going to do 20%, how we get down to 5 and when we get down to 5 with the mixed waste threshold. So I think we're all understanding we want to graduate, we have a graduated process, but I think we want to get there sooner rather than later. And I think, so we'd like to see some timelines in terms of, we're at 20 for the first year, go down to 5 right after a year, do we go to 10 after a year, do we go to 5, 5, 5 over the next 4 years? Is that fast enough for council? I'm not sure that's fast enough for me, but I think we should get to 5 as soon as we can get there. Yeah.
A couple of really good points in there. I guess in reverse order, we discussed whether we would actually write into the bylaw how it would reduce down towards 5% or whatever the final is, and decided that was really a decision for council and council today at the time, or check in, how we doing, this is what's going on, are we comfortable reducing it? But that's certainly sort of a stylistic, I guess, point. If you would prefer to put in a more prescriptive reduction, I think that we could do that. On the clear bags, I guess one thing that I just want to be clear on is I think we're really focusing a lot on the single-family residential and clear bags. Clear bags would be, as written at the moment in the draft, would be for everybody and would make those spot checks and those audits on multifamily or ICI much simpler and safer for staff. It's really, there's maybe a little bit of a factor, fairly significant factor perhaps, of you're walking your clear plastic bag down to the bin to throw it in the bin, and you can see yourself, oh geez, I'm not doing so well in there. But I don't want to lose track of the fact that it will simplify the enforcement for ICI and multifamily. So I don't know if we want to try to carve out the single-family residential as a possibility there. I'm not sure I have the consensus yet on that point.
No, I don't think they're bags of, you don't have consensus on that point at all. Susan and Ken.
Thanks, I would agree with what's been said about plastic bags. I just think focusing, I don't see the value until we go to a system that can actually monitor the plastic bags. I can't see our bylaw officers who are hiring people to do that yet. I don't know, even, focusing on the commercial group, our town does not yet have a ton of commercial, we have grocery stores that contribute a large amount of waste, but other than that, I can't. Is there other businesses I can't? Yeah, all the market food, all that.
Oh, yeah,
There's a lot of,
it
it's
contributes a
huge,
lot.
but a lot of it's organics, right?
It really depends on the business.
Right. I'm just trying to think in my head of small
There's
businesses we have.
about 70 to 80% of our garbage comes from ICI and multifamily home. We're not able to 100% kind of split
Right,
those
70,
two.
30.
Yeah,
So,
but 30% is curbside collection. Sorry, 70.
awesome. Yeah, so I would agree with the multifamily homes and making sure, like, we haven't even started the programs where we are ensuring that our new buildings have adequate garbage facilities and making sure that we're inspecting those first, and also education for businesses on, we haven't really had an opportunity to, currently we just do bins. And we have a recycling bin and we have, but we don't actually do education for businesses. We focused on education for single family homes and the public and people showing up at the farmers market, but we haven't really had education for businesses on how to reduce their waste, and then looked at what are the opportunities in there, and then how do we monetize that? There's better ways to play the long haul and look at, like, long haul being 1 or 2 years, and say that, we can look at the opportunities for us and understand what the challenges are and see if we can fix the challenges before we start implementing, but fines for right now, and then look at how that rolls out. But the clear plastic bags, I don't see the value of it yet.
So I'm hearing quite a bit of division on that particular issue with council. Karen?
Yeah, so I think that clear plastic bags should definitely be part of our education enforcement campaign for businesses and events, especially, for sure, and temporary uses. So I think that can be enforced, and we've got, as part of this plan, the ability to do spot checks, and we talked about expanding the number of people in engineering who could do spot checks, and I absolutely think, because they generate so much garbage, that is a place to start, and that's a place to put the clear plastic bag. I don't really care about multifamily at this point, like
Multifamily or
single family at this point. I think most people are trying to do a good job of separating. I think what we want to target are those homes where only the garbage bin is coming out. And that's education, and of all the enforcement to do with single family homes, is those folks who we know aren't putting out their organics bin yet. Some might.
Sorry, events and temporary users,
And
usually the
business.
third, and commercial.
Yeah.
And multifamily, I think, is going to be problematic, because especially in shared bins, there's going to be a privacy issue in the short term that we'll need to overcome, there's no doubt about it, but I don't want to delay this bylaw addressing privacy concerns in the short term. I want to go after people that generate the most garbage, and we really, really need them to start separating and reducing their waste overall. So that's where I'd like to focus on the clear plastic bags and the enforcement and the spot checks,
I
where
think
we can do that.
I think everyone's okay with, on those ICI issues, clear plastic, that's the target, that's where the challenge is most.
I think we
up
might be
here.
able to find consensus there.
Yes,
where
I think we
lose
have consensus
is
there.
over the single family home and
I just didn't
multifamily.
see the proof yet in
Yeah,
in the value.
but I think it's absolutely part of the picture.
Okay.
So those are my last thoughts.
Thank you, Doug.
Same thought. I was just listening to the conversation. I can see the issues, as Councillor Blackman Wolf pointed out, around the single-family residents and the totes and so forth. But I think it is a good piece for certainly the ICI to start it off. And we're doing this in a number of other things. I mean, we're doing it with water metering and so forth. We're starting to roll it in phases. And this might be another example of where we do that and start off with ICI. And ICI, I think, is pretty straightforward. Multifamily creates a little bit more of sensitivities, but nevertheless, they're using a common container, and I think we've got to, in my mind as a lawyer, I mean, once they drop it in the bin, that's not theirs anymore, and we can have a look at it. So for me, clear is something that, you know, it's going to be, we're going to have to change behavior, and that might be a tool. So I'd be in favor of it for multifamily. And we can wait and see how it goes, and maybe one day for single family, or maybe not. But the numbers are obviously much more significant, and so the enforcement becomes more problematic and so forth.
And the only other thing is, I'm not 100% convinced about the 5 a.m. putting it out thing in terms of the wildlife attracted piece, or the pros and cons of that. Or the intention of that was to make sure people with garages keep it in longer. But I suspect, and maybe, do we have numbers or percentages of people who keep it out or keep it inside?
No, there's no.
So, I mean, I just think that type of thing is going to cause more confusion than not, to be honest. But yeah.
I think that's something that staff maybe need a little bit more time to discuss. But we're scheduled to be back in a week to talk about readings, and we can have a little bit more to say at that point, whether we pull it. Certainly, I don't think anybody around the table wants to derail this bylaw around that one issue. It's something that can go in later in another amendment. So I think you were kind of running down the list of
But I think
items.
the other timeframes, I don't think there's any debate about. It's just having this other weird time frame about you put it out, but it can't be locked, and it's all a little bit almost too confusing. Streams, I think all that, didn't hear any dissension on any of those issues. Clear plastic, I think the focus is demolition, construction waste, and multifamily and ICI is where we have 70% of our waste issues, and that's where we need to be focusing on this bylaw. I don't think any of the other issues that are up there. There were some other things mentioned that aren't up there, allowing people to have more recycling bins if they want. If they want to recycle more, that's great. People want to, we need to be encouraging that, and the garbage side is pays for that.
And along that, just to read back, make sure that we're on the same page, so looking into the incentives for businesses potentially, as well as the asbestos RFP potential scenario for drywall.
Some way.
And then, yeah.
So
Those are the other key.
I saw sort of a not necessarily for this bylaw at this time, but as key areas for us to focus in the next months. Definitely the demolition is big. Tote space inside houses or inside buildings we were going to look into and clarify, but that would probably not be in this bylaw anyway. The asbestos drywall. Incentives, I think we agreed that would be a great thing sort of after our 1-year education period and everything, as part of that process to develop an incentive program and talk to our staff and our contractors as Squamish Can and other stakeholders about how that might look.
Yep.
BIA. We were going to clarify the totes and bike lanes language.
Yep.
We'll talk about probably removing the 5 a.m. line, but we'll talk among staff on that one. Recycling tote, an extra recycling tote, and your comments there. And then clear plastic bags, I think people were nodding, but I'd look to the chair for a call on, we're basically going to limit that to ICI events and temporary users.
Yeah,
Is
the
that
last
the
one that
consensus?
was up there, yeah.
Okay.
At this point, and I think if we start to get cameras in the curbside pickup, then maybe, but until there's a real proof in the pudding of automated totes and clear plastic bags in terms of diversion rates, I'd like to see that.
And the only other item that I had here was the reducing the 20% down at a certain pace. Do we want to write in a 5% per year or something like that, or what do
Yeah,
we
I
wanna
think
do there?
that's, I see the pros and cons of it. We might want to ramp it up, so you don't want to get locked into something and create an under, but maybe just a line in there saying, this will be reduced.
Mhm.
And we can determine that rate on a yearly basis. Like, it could be that we go, well, you know what, everyone's hitting 20, no problem, let's go down to 5 right away, or it might be 10. I can see not getting locked into something, but I think it wants to be clear that this is not the final rate. So somewhere in the bylaw communication, it needs to be very clear that this is a starting point, and we're gonna proactively be moving that goal down to 5%. It's not, it's in the report, it's not in the bylaw. So that's the challenge, so.
Mm.
Just Karen, quick question of clarification. Chris said ICI, advanced and temporary users, and demolition.
And MFH.
Did you get multifamily?
I said the last 3.
So
That
you guys
was,
weren't on the same page.
yeah, thank you for
That's
bringing
why I was
that up.
clarifying it, last 3. I'm looking at that, ICI, MFH, advanced and temporary users.
So you would like to see clear bags for multifamily
We
homes?
want proactive, strategic reduction in those realms, because that's where we have our biggest growth.
Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Doug, did you have your hand?
I did, about, what were you just talking about?
Percent introductions?
Yeah, so it was in the report, and I thought that was reasonable, 5% a year for 4 years.
It's just not in the bylaw.
No, but
Yeah.
leading to the bylaw, I thought it was in the report. And I guess, you know, if we got to a point where 2 years from now, we thought that that wasn't fast enough or it was too fast, is it a matter, I guess, of amending the bylaw? Unless you want to put some kind of language there, unless resolved by council otherwise or something like that to short circuit that process. But I think that absolutely put it in the bylaw, the people know what's coming. Put the dates in and,
And if we want to ramp it up, we can amend the bylaw, but at least something's in there.
yeah, if that's what it takes, I guess we can amend the bylaw.
Yeah, everyone okay with that?
Okay.
Great. Thanks. Anything else? I think we covered it all. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
You got a 1 hour report?
Yeah, right? And, I mean, we didn't really get into it much, but we need to start having all those diversion options in the public realm as well. We have a lot of garbage, we have 1 or 2 recycling, I know there's contamination issues, but until we start to have that communication in the public purview, it'll help in the, you know, there's pros and cons. Anyway, in terms of capital upgrades, we need to be doing that throughout.
Mhm.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Why don't we just take a 3-minute break and then we'll get into the strategic. We are on 3.2, our strategic plan update. Ms. Glendale.
Thank you, Mayor Huntsman. I'm Linda Glendale, CAO here at the District of Squamish. This is an update, and plan was to wrap up the strategic plan update today. Looks like we're a bit tight on time, so I've been working with Ms. Arthurs, and we figured out a way to complete it next week in the committee of the whole. So we will adapt to the timing and get as much done as we can today. So our objective in the June strategic plan workshop was to narrow down what council wants to have completed or be in progress by the end of your term, which is October 2018. I'll briefly go through just a refresher on what was covered. Today's objective was to complete the priorities of all of the outstanding items to inform the budget. I don't believe we'll get that done today, but I have a way that we can complete it by next week. So a brief review of so this is what I'd hoped to complete today. Priority scoring of outstanding action items is something we can do outside of council and then bring it back next week, and I'll talk about how to get that done. June strategic workshop, just as a refresher, staff brought forward lists of the strategic plan items that are completed and those that are outstanding. celebrated a lot of the things that we have completed to date to complete council's strategic goals. We then went through, if you remember, an exercise where you talked about the priorities you had when you first came into council, if they've changed, what your priorities are now. Then we consolidated those as a group. Following that, you went through a SWOT exercise, so what are our internal strengths, our internal weaknesses as an organization, and then what opportunities and threats exist outside that we can capitalize on or address. Following that, we took all of the outstanding items and marked them on a matrix of impact versus scope. So community impact, and then versus scope of the project, and scope being cost, resources, time, complexity, and control. So out of that, what happened was a list which is before you, and I'll bring it up for the public's enjoyment. What we did was we came up with what were non-discretionary, and this is what staff have brought to council previous to the June workshop, because these are things, and our definition of non-discretionary are those things that are already budgeted in the 2017 financial plan, commenced, contracted, council directed. Thank you. So these are things that we don't recommend changing because of that. Some of which we can't because they're contracted. Some are 100% grant funded, and I will go through those in terms of clarification from the last meeting. This isn't particularly readable, actually, so maybe I'll do better. And they are color-coded according to the strategic plan.
Just if you moved it over a little bit, then we end up seeing this column XXL, XLs, etc. Could you explain what that column is?
Certainly. This is when we talk about scope versus impact. So we scope out each of the projects based on cost.
It was the
length
size of
time.
those pieces of paper essentially that during the.
Yeah,
Remember
so,
those, Doug?
Yep, no, I got it, yeah.
Technology.
It just didn't say that.
Yeah.
thanks, yeah. So Technology Transformation Program and OCP are two of our largest projects, obviously, and also were indicated as high impact. Most things were indicated as high impact, which is why they're all mostly still on the list. There are a few things taken out. For clarification, we had a couple items where council wasn't sure of the impact or the rationale for having them on the list. These were primarily engineering projects. The Integrated Stormwater Management Plan, as an example, is 100% grant funded and already committed to. Where's the other one? Squamish River Floodplain Quantitative Risk Assessment, additionally, is also 100% grant funded and already committed to. We've been through these items a lot in terms of our strategic plan updates and our workshop, but for the purpose of the public, Mayor Heisman, would you like me to clarify each of the projects?
That would be great, thank you.
Okay. So our TTT program is the overall transformation of our backbone technology program and business processes. It's a 4-year project, budgeted in 2016, over 4 years, and significant costs. But great value in terms of improving our services, our efficiencies, and our risk mitigation. Official community plan update. Ideally by now the community is well aware of what this is, but we're into our 2nd year of this project and wrapping it up by the end of 2017. The zoning bylaw rewrite. Our zoning bylaw needs a major overhaul, and this project hasn't started as of yet, although it is directed in the strategic plan. That is because it comes on the tail of the completion of the OCP. So it's scoped and fit into our work plan and budget at this time. Squamish Nation Services Agreement is something that we are currently working on with staff. It's a big one, and also if you'll notice on the right, we have indicated those items where the completion isn't entirely under our control because we're working with other agencies and their timelines. Municipal Hall Civic Services Building redevelopment, we're coming to the end of our initial, or our first phase of that. It is contracted out and something that, in terms of that first phase and plans, we'll be bringing to council in the fall. Real estate and municipal facility strategy and action plan is quite a comprehensive study and strategy and recommendations to do with all of our real estate and facility assets. And that, again, will be coming to council in the fall. Implement the Safe Routes to School program. That's well underway through our engineering department with all of our schools in the district. Actioning the key elements of the wayfinding program. So the wayfinding contract has been put out and the designs done. And this year we have started to construct and design some of the signs. Gary, do you want to add to that?
In fabrication in Burnley right now.
A little disappointed how delayed that is. It's supposed to be in before the summer.
It's true.
So the contractor, I know there's been some issues and there needs to be a conversation.
Yes, exactly. Complete Marine Strategy Phase 2. Staff actually just met yesterday on scoping that project out. We'll be coming before council to get clarity and make sure that our definition of what the scope and deliverables are is the same as council's. We do have money in the 2017 budget to work on that project.
And maybe Councillor Reese wants to speak to that a bit, but that should dovetail with some of this task force on the house sound. I think Gary was up here too. That's considering some of that stuff.
Definitely. Greening subdivision and control bylaw is underway. There's a bit of a pause right now with replacing an engineer, but that is definitely underway at this time with staff resources. Economic development implementation and committee is well underway through our new economic development officer, Kate Mulligan. Our affordable housing contract, again, has been contracted to Macola Development Services, and they are currently working on the two-prong of what kind of a program would best serve the district and also potential purpose-built rental sites on district land. So
Now,
that's-
they were going to come present to council early on in this contract. When are they scheduled?
They're scheduled to come in September. They're still currently doing some feasibility and research and meeting with BC Housing, Sea to Sky Community Services Society, and they'll be providing an update based on all of that information in September.
Is this on the affordable housing contract?
Well, I'm actually missed one. So I just-
Which one was that?
Phase 2 of the wind strategy. One question.
What's that?
How many phases is there?
2.
2 phases.
Yeah.
Just on the Macola contract, I thought what we had asked was that they come in early just to present their timelines and the work that they are going to do, rather than waiting until they had something to deliver.
Yeah.
I think some of council's unease was that it was a contractor and not a staff person. And so it was just trying to put some of that comfort level in, like, here's our work plan, here's when these things are happening, here's who we're meeting with. And it was more about us understanding what they will deliver and when,
Yeah.
versus coming in September with a deliverable. So
Right.
we want to make sure we're on the same page with them. So is that, do we have to wait till September to get there? That's my question.
Mayor Heinzman,
We have one more day of meetings.
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
And I just, maybe it's more, they need to understand that that's why we wanted to meet with them early. I mean, there was a lot of differing opinions on how we wanted to action this item. And so that conversation, we want to have that conversation with a contractor up front.
okay.
And we're not expecting to have all this analysis done and da-da-da. It's more for council to communicate what our objectives and our deliverables expectations are, so that they're not going out and doing all this work that we actually don't want them to do, and have them be able to focus more.
If I can provide some clarity, so that was my misunderstanding, that you just wanted them to come in and talk about the work plan, and certainly we can provide their work plan, their scope. to council in the interim. There's no way we could get them on an agenda for next week. We're just so packed with items. But secondly, and perhaps Gary can speak more to this, there certainly aren't going to be any substantive deliverables in September. It's really that they were getting into the project, getting into the meat of it, and then providing council an update in September.
So we'll get, maybe we can put them on the first community development meeting or
Yep.
early community development meeting in September, like the first week.
Sure. Gary, did you want to clarify more what they're going to present in September? Because I don't think I'm articulating it as accurately as you can.
Well, I think they're actively engaged on 2 sites, so we can give you whatever work they've been able to do. Just this last few days, we've been discussing engaging a sub-architect, a sub-consultant architect, so having something tangible in terms of potential design. The progress that they've made with CMHC and BC Housing on funding those feasibility studies, and the work that they've made to date at that point on any of the policy pieces. And the timeline for completing those we can provide.
Yeah, see, that wasn't the intention of our first meeting with them, but, okay.
Okay. In the interim of meeting with them in September, would council like to see the ganted out
Sure.
project and deliverables? Okay, we can do that.
Okay.
LNG tax agreement. So again, this is something that's budgeted and we're just launching into this time. This is one of the ones that's grant funded, the Integrated Stormwater Management Plan. Benchmarking program, this is underway as explained before, the 2-prong. One is working with the UBCM pilot project and the other is a key performance indicator program for organizational performance generally. And we've started that and it's contracted. We had $20,000 in the CAO budget. We went out for expressions of interest and quotes and we've now contracted for that program and we've just started to get underway. Building bylaw rewrite. This is something that, as you know, our building inspector, supervisor of building inspection, has been working in the working group on the step code, and so we're dovetailing the step code with the new building bylaw rewrite, and so waiting for that.
So on that one, the step code draft is out there. I expect there's going to be some fine tuning, but it's going to be adopted by the province by the end of the year. So I'm just trying to understand, I mean, at some point we're going to know 98% of what's going to be in that bylaw. So I think what council was hoping to have an early conversation about where we want to start. So come January, we're ready to go. We're not all of us come January and then going, oh, how's this going to do it? Like come January, we're like step 3, blah, 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 with a goal to be at step 5 by here. Like, I think we want that work by the end of December. That was certainly the conversation we had when the step code was in council.
Mayor Heinzman, I believe that's the goal, but if you want to.
That is the plan.
Okay.
To have the bylaw in effect prior to the December 15th
Excellent.
deadline. The province is putting some guidelines on where they think municipalities should go and where they should not go initially. So
They love doing that, so we expect that. Ted and Karen.
Yeah, well, I'm sitting on that committee, Gary's chairing it, and we've got excellent people from the community, smart developers and people that are up on this step code, and I'm super impressed with what's going on there. So what comes back will be, we're ahead of most communities. So
And it's more the timing issue. I wasn't concerned about the quality. Karen. Thanks, Ted.
I remember earlier conversations and something was mentioned today about restrictions with regard to the building code. And we had conversations earlier about things that needed to be in place in our own bylaws before the step code came in if we wanted to be able to do them. Do you guys remember that conversation vaguely?
Well, I think that's why we wanted.
So I'm just wondering if there's anything we actually need to improve prior to the step code coming in to make sure we can still do it, that would be excluded once the step code is adopted.
as far as I'm aware, no, the amendments to the building bylaw will do that. I don't think there's anything subsidiary or accessory that's needed.
Do you understand I'm not sure you understood what Karen's question was.
Okay, so
are there things that we want to have in our bylaw before the step code is approved? Because after the step code is approved, we won't be able to, we have the ability to implement them now under the current system, but we won't under the step code. Is there anything
No,
like, okay, there is nothing, okay. You do.
sorry, whether,
Well, like, someone said with the stretch code, you can't mandate bins in garages or whatever.
well, but if those restrictions are there, they're already here.
Yeah.
So,
So if anything comes up in the meantime, where the stretch code is gonna limit the direction that the district has been trying to go in, and we need to implement them before the stretch code, or consider implementing before the stretch code, you'll bring them back to us before December, obviously?
you can't, the only way you'll be able to get them approved, even now, is through regulation, through the province.
Okay.
So that,
So that
those,
ship is sailed.
yes, it
Okay.
sailed in 2015.
Huh.
And if the ship had sailed before that, the province would effectively have torpedoed it anyway with the new legislations. It ceased our ability to do anything that was on the restricted level as of early 2015.
And I'm assuming any of these provincially mandated things that may have an impact with the new government will be paying attention.
Yes.
Okay, keep going.
Great. Site alteration bylaw rewrite. This is the trees and soils bylaw that has come before council and is currently in the engagement stage.
You skipped over community meetings.
Oh, sorry, voluntary community guidelines is coming to council in September, early October, depending on agenda timing.
Okay.
Community wildfire protection plan, this is something that Squamish Fire and Emergency Management are working on. Our youth project, so we were unsuccessful in getting the Canada 150 grant, so the scope of the project has become much smaller, but nonetheless we are working on that. Devin in Film and Events has already been working with Alex from the Youth Center, thank you, on creating a program.
And the Arts Council.
And the Arts Council, yeah. So that's
On
well
that
underway.
one, two councils had conversations about, we tend to focus on Howe Sound because they're closer, they're downtown, but really Don Ross is, I think, almost in some ways a more important age group to focus on, so I don't want to lose sight of that, and they don't have easy access to the youth center and that type of thing, so council did, this is my recollection, did say we wanted to be focusing on, particularly on some of those prevalent issues at Don Ross, like bullying and ethnicity issues and stuff like that, that's actually a bit of a target for this youth group. Thank you. Okay.
Noted, thanks. Sponsorship and community partnerships policy for arts, recreation, cultural services. The scope of this is expanded to include,
You did the qualitative floodplain?
yeah, sorry, I did speak to that before, but
Oh, it's the same as the integrated stormwater management?
correct, it's 100% grant funded.
And it's the exact same program, why don't we call it the same thing?
It's not the same program. Sorry, okay. The Squamish River Floodplain Quantitative Risk Assessment is 100% grant funded and committed and being completed through the engineering department. So the sponsorship, this is directed, it is in our work plan, but not yet started. First Nations Reconciliation Program, this year the training, so there is a budget in the CAO office, and we have, this year we're providing the Building Bridges Through Understanding the Village workshop to all of our staff, or as many staff as we can have attend, and we're halfway through that right now. So those are what we have considered the non-discretionary items, so we wouldn't recommend taking any of them off, although of course that's council's purview.
Yeah, Karen?
Just on the First Nations training, I have to say I've had staff members come up to me unsolicited and just thank us for putting that on the strategic plan. And many of them talked about it being life-changing for them, or really has changed their perspective and has really made them see the world differently. So I'm so pleased that went forward, and looking forward to other staff taking it in September. But that was, all the things on our strategic plan, that one internally certainly is going to have a big impact.
Yeah, Doug?
And I'd echo that, having taken that seminar, and if any member of council has not yet taken it, I highly recommend it. It's almost obligatory. It's a very, very good seminar.
I think we did make it obligatory. Yeah, and I've been getting also unsolicited from the workshop I was in from emails from staff, and staff just talking about it and re-engaging that conversation every time I see them, which is really good.
Yeah, that's exciting to hear. I appreciate that feedback.
Excellent.
Thank you. So what we've listed as discretionary are those items that either are not in the 2017 budget, so they're listed in the financial plan, but in future years, or not, essentially can be taken out or changed because we haven't contracted, they're not in the 2017 budget, so we can amend the financial plan when we go into 2018. The zoning bylaw rewrite, green building program, so this would dovetail with the zoning bylaw rewrite itself. And Gary, can you explain why it's a separate line here? Sorry, the zoning bylaw rewrite, the green building program, we've got it listed separately from the zoning bylaw rewrite above.
Yeah, we've pulled that out as a separate piece that we're sort of running right after the building permit. The building bylaw rewrite. So that's a piece of work that we can do separately that is a bunch of incentives around green building in the zoning bylaw, and that tailors really well with when you get the work done on the building bylaw and the step code, you step right from that into then the incentives to get you to the above the levels to where you would statutorily act through the step code. So that can just be done as a separate piece of work outside the larger zoning bylaws.
And I should clarify for council, this discretionary list, our objective, and we'll have council do this outside of this meeting and then bring it back, is to rank these, because the prioritization of these items will inform our budget process. To be frank, the budget revenue requisition will be quite high if they're all in there. And so staff really need council's direction and assistance with prioritizing them to inform our budget process. The parking strategy implementation.
So just on that, this is always a challenging thing, because we can take things off the list, but it might make no work in one department and still not, we still not deal with capacity issues. So, I mean, just for example, I'm not suggesting we do that. Maybe we don't want to do any of this emergency services planning. We're really not alleviating
Right.
problems. So I think it's important to understand where within the organization those impacts are being felt by those decisions, because they're not apples and apples.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because as an example, the emergency services projects, versus the engineering and planning department that are really heavily weighted with all of the projects.
And I think
the
some of that
capacity.
is in the color coding of this, but it's not 100% encapsulated in those divisions within our strategic.
Yeah, that's
So,
okay.
and we look to the GMs and you to help. Yeah, Karen.
So, just for a bit of clarity, that first one is the zoning bylaw rewrite, and then like the sixth one down in orange is develop green building policies to provide incentives. So are we repeating ourselves there, or?
Yeah, that is a repetition.
What's that? I didn't hear that.
That is a repetition between develop green building policies and the other one that
So that's the same thing?
Yes.
Same thing,
So we can take out which color, blue or orange?
Take the blue, because the orange is actually strategic plan. Light blue are special projects that aren't in the strategic plan.
Okay, so that's in there, okay. Okay, great.
So integrated stormwater management plans, municipal portion, this is something that both engineering and operations are hoping to achieve at some point in terms of our stormwater systems, both natural and man-made. We don't have a specific asset plan for that. We were just talking this morning about potentially going after grants for a project like this, but that's just the initial conversation. And again, that is a staff recommended special project. It's not in the strategic plan.
Yeah, go ahead.
So that's an asset management plan. So what's funded this year is the study about how we're going to manage our stormwater, and this is about managing the assets.
Can you clarify?
I don't know, what's the municipal portion?
I believe it was I believe the project that was approved this year was the one for doing some maintenance around some of our stormwater assets. And next year, I think, is the more asset management inventory project next year.
Are you sure, or do you think? Can you
I'd
be
have to go
sure?
back to the financial plan and check.
But one definitely is an inventory of the assets, and the other is reparation of what we already have. We popped living wage in here because after our last finance and audit committee, we've been tasked with coming back with what this project would look like based on what we've learned from Van City and the presenters is that it's a substantial project, but we want to know council's priority with something like this. And things keep coming up, like developing an incentive program for solid waste.
Yeah.
So I think we just have to be careful about which part of it is substantial. Identifying our living wage is 8 hours a week. That's what Dana says. So that part, not substantial.
That's coming to council in the fall.
So the procurement piece, I think everyone understands, is a large chunk of work.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to make sure that council can figure out a way to implement that over time. I imagined it would be easy to implement or would happen very quickly. But certainly for me as a special project, I would like to see that started. I think it is so fundamental, dovetail with the affordable housing strategy, that I think we'd be remiss in leaving it out. So I think it needs to get started.
Yeah, and once we know a bit more about the scope and the potential costs, we can consider that in the budget. But at this point, we're looking for the baseline information to help start to
and
inform.
the importance of putting this in was recognizing that it could be a priority and that it will extend beyond the initial report that council will see. So we'd like that to help with the budget direction.
Yeah, but I think tell me if I get this wrong, Councilor Elliott, because it has an L beside it, it's a multi-year program, and there's pieces of it that are quite small to move us forward. So I think that's where council wants to understand is, we just do a blanket decision, let's just take that off because it's a large project with over capacity, whereas really it's a more complicated conversation or a decision than just that. See what I'm saying? So, I mean, I think this is a way to break it down so we understand, but there's pieces within that. It's not a black or white question.
Yeah.
Just on that point, you can just go back to that, because up there it says living wage procurement process, and on my sheet it's just living wage.
I just changed it.
There we go.
Based on the conversation.
Yeah, you got it right. So, because I was just going to say, feel free to phase this in. For me, it's very important to make the initial statement as quickly as possible. Procurement, as Councilor Elliott mentioned, is quite a significant issue, and that could take a little bit of time. But I would echo wanting to get the initial statement out there and as quickly as possible.
And the initial analysis of what our numbers.
And certainly procurement is an issue for the organization generally, outside of living wage, so the whole discussion is a good one.
And just on that, is it in here for procurement? Because we've been talking about it for,
Just on there now.
well, no, I know it's, thank you. But, because Robin, we've been talking about updating that, whether it's green, socially responsible procurement, living wage procurement. That whole procurement piece almost should be an entity in and of itself, and we've sort of talked around it in multiple different silos, but really that's a project in and of itself, and living wage is just one piece of the procurement. Why is that word so hard, project?
And just to further clarify, you're right, internally, we haven't been doing it in silos. So it's been informing a rewrite of the purchasing policy or our new purchasing bylaw, which has come to a halt right now. with the TTP and the finance department being so heavily involved right now in that. But it's been, it's seeing different iterations with different leadership in the finance department over the last couple of years. So it is moving along, it's just, it's snail's pace, and it is at a draft stage, for sure.
And I think what council's saying is
Yeah,
living wage is part of that procurement
then
conversation.
to make sure that those green pieces are in.
And green, social responsibility, a whole bunch of.
For sure.
Yeah, okay, Ted?
Well, on that, the last time we discussed that with the living wage people, the credit union ended up saving a couple $1 million first year. They paid attention to that, so it's a good reason.
Yeah, there's upsides, I think.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely,
Yeah.
that's part of it.
Yeah, we have discussed as staff bringing forward a business case for procurement
Yeah, that was,
program
Great,
based on that.
thank you.
Regional transportation, notice the X to the right in terms of locus of control for the district, as this is requiring other partners and priorities. Develop green building policies, we talked about that, so I removed the green elements of the zoning, because this is the same thing. Develop a growth plan for district and regional transit services in collaboration with BC Transit and local partners. Plan for funding an improved and expanded Brennan Park Recreation Center and its
What's
programs.
the difference? Yeah,
Yeah.
That was my question too,
yeah.
between the first and the third.
If I can take a stab at it.
Sure.
I
This
think the
comes right
first
out
one
of
is
mine.
a bit more of a collaborative lobbying effort,
Mhm.
more politically driven with Whistler, with Cambridge, with regional district. Whereas the other one is a more in-process project that's already initiated by BC Transit.
Correct.
The first one could likely include motor fuel tax and some other things that are maybe not specific to what's going on in this one.
Thank you.
How we understand it too.
Yeah.
I think when you think about that and how this, looking at the third one, how that actually might unfold, I mean, I think that's going to be a necessary part of that. It's almost impossible, in my mind, to separate the two. I mean, we're going to have to do that to get a regional plan up and running. I just don't see how the two can operate independently. So, and we're going to, inevitably, it's not just us, it'll be the SLRD, other municipalities, et cetera. So I'd be inclined to merge the first and the third, just for simplicity's sake. I mean, to me, it's just, it is the same thing.
Yeah. Jason? No, he already had a stand up before you, Susan.
Yeah.
And I think like even broader, just beyond like the regional transportation plan goes beyond just transit and like actually understanding, you know, the highway, right? And you know what its capacity is, what's the usage, where are the breakdowns, and how do we solve those things? And sort of, you know, transit will be part of that, but it's only one piece of the equation. And then, you know, in my view too, you know, transit buses, I mean, only one part of it, could be other transit options as well.
Yeah. Super.
Thanks, yeah, and I,
Jen?
thinking about that as well, you know, if you look at what happened during the Olympics, where they had a fast lane, that may be the future of our highway, is having a fast lane for rapid transit for buses or for commuters as well, like in carpooling lanes. There's a lot of innovative solutions that we have to discover, so maybe those two are separate entities. One has to do with highway and infrastructure, and one has to do with transit infrastructure as well. I don't know how many years have I been on council, we've been discussing having a regional transit committee, and it's still, we have that committee to,
No, well, the staff, I mean, they're supposed to bring it back, and I'm surprised we
that's
don't
been
have it
too
yet.
long.
I know, I'm surprised we don't have it yet, so that, September.
Because it is a committee to start a committee, we should have just started a committee.
Well, staff have a working group,
It
and
should
they
be.
were gonna come forward with how this, regional committee would actually, this is what we discussed with Mike Curry 2-3 months ago, so.
Is it met?
The staff technical work group, yes, it has, and that's what Mike said right away that they were gonna bring back. Maybe that was an SLRD meeting. Anyway, they were gonna bring back the structure of what this transportation authority or whatever it ends up looking like would be. So we're expecting that back fairly soon and maybe touch base with Mike Curry and,
Just an update would be great.
yeah, we'll get that in September.
September's looking like a busy month.
That's not business. We're just looking at this, maybe we break these down a little differently in that the regional transportation transit issues are one, and then you have developed a growth plan for the district transit and local partners.
Like
I'm
take
just-
out the regional.
but maybe we just need to articulate those more clearly about what is what.
Take the regional part out of the second
I
one?
think we have the regional piece, and we have the growth plan for the internal piece.
Yeah.
And they might dovetail a little bit, but
Because one is our deal and one involves other partners in the province.
does that make sense to everyone?
Is there
And
still
there's-
an infrastructure piece, and which one would the infrastructure piece go to? Is that the regional?
I think the regional transportation plan would deal
Includes
with
the
regional
infrastructure.
intercity pinch points and stuff, Jason. If there's internal infrastructure pieces, that would be, so I think we break it down into regional and internal
Mhm.
transit and transportation issues. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We're potato a little bit, but,
Yes, that makes sense.
okay.
So as I mentioned, the green building, we talked about that in terms of it going into the zoning bylaw. Funding and improved and expanded Brennan Park, so this has now been dovetailed into the real estate and facilities strategy. I know that Tim
So that's
actually-
underway.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Well, is that what the asterisk means in the form?
yes.
It means it's over on the other side.
It
and
means it's on the
underway.
other side and I need to move it.
Okay. Thank you.
I will send you an updated list before I get you to work on it.
Awesome. Thank you.
The next one down, this is special project in terms of emergency services. Ideally, we don't want them to be discretionary, and this is one of those situations where emergency services, regardless of everybody else's load, isn't as loaded up, so.
This is their load.
This is their load, yeah. So we may just move these out when you get the new list.
And it could, we do want to break these down in terms of, these are the ones, these don't affect capacity issues because departments have capacity to do them. These are the ones that affect capacity issues, and then they become budget decisions. Do we want extra planners or consultants on these, and these to get them done or not?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. Downtown entrance study. I believe this is a DCC project, but currently not underway or committed. Correct, Gary?
Correct. So,
There's a threshold number for when that has to be done by, right? Within the DCC bylaw? Like, I thought there's a threshold with the downtown development and oceanfront development. If it gets to a certain capacity, then it's a DCC project assigned in the front end, or is it not with the oceanfront?
I'd have to check. I don't believe it's in the front ender, but I'll double check.
Okay. Maybe, I can't remember. Anyway. Okay.
Great. Okay, develop strategy to increase youth participation in the 2018 election. I mean, certainly a lot of youth engagement has been happening, but not a specific strategy document or plan. It's been more ad hoc with the World Cafes and the youth project.
On something like that,
generally.
I think we could tap into a Quest student or two to really come up with a program for us. Like, there's a whole group of them that want to help promote participation in elections, so, like, I wouldn't consider that. We can figure out how to collaborate with the community to develop that. Doug?
And the question is that part of the 3 or 4 down, adopt a comprehensive Squamish youth engagement strategy? Would that be one of the included items in that? It's getting more involved in municipal politics and voting every 4 years.
Yeah, it could be a bullet underneath the Squamish Youth Engagement Strategy generally.
Okay, thanks.
The next one, develop a strategy to increase voter turnout greater than 50% in the municipal election.
Good issue.
Yeah.
So that could be really easy.
Yes.
Diapers.
Leave that to you. And then a carbon, develop a policy that moves the district
Well,
towards
just on that,
neutrality.
we were talking about having referendum polling questions strategically, so that's a big piece of what that is.
And you know, we were already at 47% in the last election, so this is not a stretch. If we, you know, if council wants to put a question, especially one that's not just a polling survey type question, but a real, a bylaw,
Yeah.
a bylaw, you will definitely be over that 50%.
Karen?
Keep in mind that we might also have the proportional representation vote as part of this municipal election.
Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah.
So we might not have to do a lot of work, because that could drive participation as well.
So maybe we up our goal.
So,
But
no,
that'd
it's
be
just something to keep
burden
in
on the council.
And we're among the highest in the province. We get the highest, among the highest turnouts in the province.
Really? I thought we were right in the middle.
Absolutely. Nope, the average is 24%, and we've been as high as 66%.
But that was in the 80s.
No, that was in 2002, we had 66% voter turnout. I can send the numbers around too.
Oh, that was because there was a party running and they had a big
With the chips.
phone tree, yeah,
That was the chips.
yeah. And the chips thing.
But we're always, you know, up in the 40s. Even for our by-elections, we're 28%, which is unheard of.
We haven't had a by-election in a while, but we didn't want
Thank goodness.
Okay, where are we? I'm sorry, distraction.
Okay, next one down is develop a policy that moves the district towards carbon neutrality by 2018. So this is referring to our internal operations. The order of things is to, like, the quick win was the carbon marketplace, which staff have put into effect. Second is our own neutrality, and then going up to the community. So this is not yet started.
Okay.
Marketplace.
Just,
The marketplace has, yeah.
Yeah.
is that a big job? Can you, some idea of scope of that?
It's a medium job, according to, sorry, I don't mean to be glib, but Gary, do you want to speak?
I mean, in
to-
terms of time and capacity and so forth.
Yeah.
It's the marketplace, carbon marketplace is sort of rolling along. The corporate plan just requires a lot of coordination between departments, whether it's fleet, purchasing, facilities. Some of it's already underway. Camilla's already been on this track for years, so it's not huge, but it's not a small project.
When you say small, medium, large, extra large, extra large, do you quantify that in actual hours?
We haven't to date, no.
It's more of a just a, that looks like a medium?
At this time, yeah.
Karen?
Something else that I think would be helpful to keep in mind too is that we have the Safe Routes to School project, and we're going to implement a lot of capital, but it's the behavior change piece that'll be harder to sustain over time. And so it's looking at projects like that and the carbon marketplace, because the carbon marketplace, I don't even know if anybody's signed up. But, so there may be projects that we implemented, but aren't going to be able to be sustained or need money to really entrench them in people's behavior and, or may need a little bit of push. Like I think the carbon marketplace is it more important to have a plan to get to carbon neutrality by 2018, or is it more important to make sure that that's really successful because it can drive economic development and
Ironically, someone could probably start a diaper business and be funded through the carbon marketplace.
So anyway,
Yeah.
I would also want staff to sort of look at things we have completed but might need a bit more love in the budget to make sure that they are actually going to be successful over the long term. That's the Safe Routes to School one is something that I talked about with Keely about, have we done enough to sustain it? And she said that there weren't champions in the schools still. So, that project's at risk. We can put in all the infrastructure we want. If parents and kids still don't get on the streets to walk and bike, we haven't been successful. So, anyway, food for thought.
That's a great point, thank you. So next is the comprehensive emergency management plan, and similarly, do we just keep this in because that department isn't necessarily overloaded? We need to look at the budget scope of that as well. But what I'll do is I'll provide an updated list of this to council, given that recommendation to demonstrate the effect on capacity. Boundary extension project through real estate. Cost legal fees and some staff time. We talked about the youth engagement strategy, so this looks just more comprehensive than speaking specifically to the voter turnout. Another real estate project, sponsor Crown Grant survey, and implementing a mail-in ballot option.
Which we already did.
With the bylaw we're working on completing the bylaw in August so that we can adopt it in the fall.
Okay, so that's underway as well. In terms of what came off from the last strategic planning was adopting the neighborhood energy utility bylaw, the geotechnical analysis for the airport, just given where we're at with the hazard issue with the Chikai. There's timing on that needs to happen first. Cemetery master plan, and designing and constructing the Squamish entrance sign. We talked about dovetailing this into the wayfinding program or pushing it out if council wants to make this more specific and public art project. And then completed, since we last met in June, sanitary sewer master plan, which you can't read there, and the Cleveland Avenue Capital Improvements Phase 2. So the goal at this point, as I said, is to have council prioritize these to inform our budget process. I will send around an updated list based on our conversation today electronically, and then if anyone needs one hard copy, we can print those out. The method is that you rank them, your top priority number 1, second priority number 2, and we add them all up from the 7 councillors, and the lowest score is the top priority, etc. Additionally, and what we can bring to council and talk about next week, because I recognize we're running out of time to get the special meeting, is what could inform our public engagement for the budget. So are there some projects here that we want to go out and ask the public about specifically and get ahead of that before we're way into the budget and do it now? And so we can council can turn your minds to that, and we can follow up next week.
And then the one other piece, we were going to basically outline things that aren't necessarily impacting department capacity.
Correct.
And other projects that we have to make some decisions on, because they're not all made equal in terms of that consideration. And I question some of the things that have M's and some have L's, but anyway, we can get into that conversation once we listen to Susan and Doug.
In the participatory budgeting, we've gone through every year asking for software, getting not really software presented, and then discussing a few questions, and then it never happens. So I'd like to actually see an effort being put into.
So this isn't our whole work plan, there's a whole bunch of things that aren't.
Yeah.
The operational pieces.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of operational pieces, so those types of things are still ongoing, I'm assuming? Yeah, like this is only a snapshot of some key strategic pieces of council, but there's all sorts of stuff that's going. So participative budgeting, is that still in the process, Robin or Amanda?
At last year, Mayor Heinzman, what was decided was the Dentville Park design would be the participatory section of the budgeting, recognizing that the scope of an entire budget being participatory would be challenging. And that is ongoing currently with the design of Dentville Park. In terms of software, we have looked into that. We did do some modeling with Sandra Koenig last year. If we get some questions way ahead of the budget, it will be much easier for us to implement something like that as a pilot as well. Like certainly not as comprehensive as, say, a City of Boston at this time, but to pilot it with the community with a couple of key questions around some items or operational projects would be a good start for us to get our toe into.
So let's get that on a finance and audit committee in the fall.
Yeah, I disagree. It shouldn't be a single project. It should be more comprehensive about where people want to see the money go. We have things like Brendan Park. We have things like new City Hall coming up. We have all these things that could be participatory. They could be just a dial that, you know, are you interested in your taxes going to this? Are you interested in, like, that are actually a yay, nay question that'll help us inform our budget. And often it's like a park, like a single item as opposed to where would you like your resources to go?
So we're talking about two different things. Participatory budgeting is, you pretty much get to vote on how your money is spent.
Yeah.
What you're asking for is input on priority setting through the budget. We do that with a whole bunch through the budget process already. I think what Susan's asking is there was some software and some online tools we were going to explore to help. Is that where you're going, Councillor Sproul?
I can't remember before I was interrupted again. So,
I'm trying to be efficient.
Yes,
We're already
I-
20 minutes over time, so I'm going to be helping to facilitate everybody get their point across because we need to finish this meeting.
that's awesome. Okay, perfect. You can make the point then. I'm good.
Karen?
Okay, so I'm happy to put something on the finance and audit committee, but people are talking about two different things. So I want clarity on what people want to talk about. So participatory budgeting, the way I understand it and guidance from people is that you really are giving control of the decision to the people. And so that's a project, or that's your community enhancement grants, that's how Tofino started. Then there's another piece, which is community, we want your input early on, and I think this is what you're talking about, Linda,
Yes.
about where you would like us to focus in this budgeting process. And so that's a different, that's not really, it's yes, you get to participate, but it's a different term.
Right.
So,
And they're both
valid,
and they both should be on the finance.
and so you want them both?
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't have time to talk about
Yeah,
it
we
now.
can talk about it.
And it's in, like, I just want to, the point is that this is not everything we're doing. There's a whole lot of other things we're doing. Yes.
Just quickly on that, I think an activity like that could be important just sort of to get the pulse of the community. You kind of just, rather than saying like very specific things like, Brennan Park or this or that, more like, recreation, like what are the areas you'd like to see more focus, and kind of, that way we get a reflection of how we're doing. So
And that's not
kinda how I
participatory, that's not participatory budgeting.
Mm-hmm.
That's public engagement. Yeah.
Different topic. Just going back a little bit to the item that's right at the top of the list we see on the screen, the comprehensive emergency management plan. And I'm wondering, does that encompass going above that emergency services projects? Are they part of that? Is there a reason for separating them out? There's two different bullets, or is that a timing thing, or do one now, one later? Or?
Yeah, so one is a comprehensive strategy to cover the community. The upper ones are more operational projects that Alexis is doing concurrent to.
And one's in the plan and the other two.
Sorry, what was that?
One is in the plan. The comprehensive emergency management plan is in council's strategic document, the other three aren't.
Yeah, the other three are operational special projects that we're bringing to council's attention.
Yeah, and I think that's where it gets confusing, is this is council's strategic priorities, but some things get put in there as part of operational pieces, but they may not necessarily need to be in this, they're in the work plan more than, and if they're not impacting capacity decisions, let's not confuse things by maybe having them in there. Okay, we have to start our next meeting, so Linda, where are we in terms of?
So next step, Mayor Heisman, is I will send this list as demonstrating the effect on capacity to council, and then ask council members individually to rank the programs, recognizing that it's unlikely with a realistic budget we can do them all, or we can at least have that discussion, and then send them to me, and I will then collate them. One question in terms of presenting it next week, originally, so I've got all of you on here. Do you want your rankings to be public, or would you rather just have the total shown next week?
I'm good with public.
I don't see why we wouldn't want to just open it, because it's, the conversation may impact the ranking after, but this is, like, yeah.
And then that will really help staff to move into that, to our budgeting process and then the public engagement process. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, motion to terminate the meeting, moved by Councilor Blackmore, second by Councilor Early. All those in favor, opposed, motion carries.